you said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this.
Yes.
I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls. You know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust Poles, and I don't like Poles because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Listen, no, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Actually, I must be back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Great to have your company. Lots to talk about. Quite a lot to talk about. I would say a little bit too much news to talk about today. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is great to have your company. Well, I'm with you all the way until 1 o'clock. Lots and lots of top guests coming up. Coming up, I want to talk to you specifically about Keir Starmer last night being accused by the Tories of undercutting British workers, implementing a two-tier tax system after signing a £5 billion trade deal with India that exempts Indian migrant workers who are here for 3 years from paying national insurance. Now, this is already the system for 17 other countries, but the thing is, there are an awful lot more Indians, 1.4 billion of them. And I'm not quite sure how many Brits are planning to go and work in India compared to how many Indians are coming to work in this country. So is it a good deal or not? We'll be talking about that. And I'd love to hear from you on that as well. Also, a review of the police response to last summer's Southport riots. Yet another review, simply report after report into this, by the Chief Inspector of Constabulary. It's concluded there was no conclusive evidence that disorder was coordinated by extremist groups. Remember that claim? And also criticised the police for a lack of preparation and failing to keep up with the risk posed by social media. We'll talk to a police specialist about that later. And a new poll by More in Common has found that if the Conservatives want to beat Reform UK at the next election, then they'd have to bring back, guess who? I know, of course you can guess. Boris Johnson, the former PM. Again, once he forced out of number 10 in 2022, he forced himself out, is the only party leader under whom the Tories poll higher than their opponents on the right. Yeah, but would that be the case if he were actually back? A bit of wishful thinking. It's a poll that's published in the Daily Mail, who were obsessed with getting Boris back. This, of course, comes amid rumours abounding and been going on for quite some time, but certainly since last Thursday, of a plot to oust Kemi Badenoch. Plus, of course, that Indian missile attack on Pakistani-controlled territory, which has killed at least 26 civilians and left 46 injured, is top of the news agenda today. It comes as the countries exchanged fire and airstrikes and heavy shelling across the de facto border dividing Kashmir. Now, the exchange has been viewed as a major escalation in their hostilities, bringing the two nuclear-armed neighbours to the brink of war. Pretty much every major power in the world has kind of intervened to say, can everyone cool their heads? We're going to be talking about that, plenty more besides. I'm delighted to say joining me for all the chat today is Claire Pearcell, former Conservative Government Advisor, particularly at the Home Office, which I think will come in very handy for a lot of the conversations today. A very, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
We need to start, I think, with Pakistan shooting down Indian jets after India fired missiles on what they claim were terror camps, and Pakistan claims were civilian targets. Let's not pretend, everybody, that we're all experts on this particular conflict. It has been going on for decades, or, as Donald Trump said, well, centuries, really. I'm sure at some point someone on social media is going to blame the British for the partitioning of the Indian subcontinent. It's all our fault. Everything that happens ever is our fault. I'm sure that is the case. There is no doubt there is a lot of animosity between these two countries. There's still massive big issue over Kashmir. The big worry for the rest of the world, let's be honest, is you are two powers that have nuclear weapons. This is very, very scary for not just Indians and Pakistanis and anyone else in the region, but also the whole world.
It is, and the argument between these two nations, when you add nuclear weapons into it, just becomes an awful lot more scary. And I think people need to start looking at how this is going to affect everybody else. Who is that going to have to get involved? That's going to be the UK, it's going to be the US, whether we all like it or not.
We're glad all counts. The Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians and everyone else are now sort of putting that up and spoiled it in a calm down everybody sort of way.
Yeah, everybody wants to calm this down. It's quite interesting that the planes that were shot down last night, which Pakistan said, we did this, that was our job, the Indian authorities haven't actually confirmed that. They've been very, very quiet on that front. So I think that we're going to get a lot of this sort of tit for tat, he said, she said kind of argument going on. But this has really been going on since at least 1947 for the history buffs among us, when they gained independence from the UK and Kashmir became this sort of territory on its own. So it's not going to be a surprise that war has broken out, given only a few weeks ago, on the 22nd of April, there was an awful atrocity that was carried out and 25 Indian civilians and one Nepali were killed. So this is in retaliation for that. So how this escalates, I think, is going to be seen, and that's what we need to worry about.
And it is always fascinating. Western nations, and again, the criticism of, say, Israel, or criticism of, it's outrageous, you respond in a certain way. It's like, well, how do you think our country responds to this stuff? How do people respond to 9/11? How do people respond to these other attacks? This is what happens. Obviously, we have a huge population here of people from of Indian heritage and of Pakistani heritage. There will be fears also that this leads to internecine conflicts in many of our British towns and cities. We've seen that on the streets before, because there is a religious element to a lot of this dispute, as well as a national and a territorial element.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people are worried that the communities are going to come to heads on the streets of the United Kingdom. And I don't think that is... I don't think
they
that's
won't
wrong.
be called far-right extremists, though, will they?
No, and I don't
wrong
think
colour.
And I don't think it's wrong to suggest that they will do that. I think that we are going to see some retaliatory
largely
attacks.
peaceful protests is what they'll be called. Largely peaceful protests as people hold bricks
retaliatory
in their hands.
attacks.
We have seen these battles play out on the streets. Again, I would be very surprised if we don't see something happening there. But let's absolutely hope there's more preparation for that than there is for. And that report, the Inspector of Constabulary into the Southport riots, basically saying, it wasn't organised in any sense by sort of far-right extremist groups online. There was different people making comments. There was general anger. Of course, they've also blamed economic poverty and even austerity. The word austerity gets in there, basically. So if you're a bit poor. If you're a bit poor, out of a job, absolutely, you should go and throw bricks and threaten to burn down a mosque. Yeah, seems normal and reasonable. I mean, they don't often make economics is so often used as an excuse for this stuff, isn't it?
And it's absolutely
really isn't, and it's such an insult to people who are also struggling financially.
It's offensive to those people who are struggling financially, because they're not going to be going out there throwing bricks as standard. That isn't going to be their response to everything that's going on. But I think that you need to have a look at...
the poor people over there who can't control their own... It's so bloody patronising. It really is. People were very angry. There were hoodlums. An awful lot of the people who got done for actual violence in the post-Southport riots were people who had plenty of convictions already. They weren't, those 14-year-olds and things, they weren't like little good as gold, those little straight-A students. They weren't, future astronauts. They weren't. They were hoodlums already.
And they were given an opportunity to be able to go out there and carry out under the guise of these are protests, and everybody's going to sort of assume that it was the far right, whatever that is.
Yeah, exactly. Easy.
And it was just an easy target to
claim.
blame.
Exactly. Well, let's come back to India, very much in the news. And you would have thought the British government would have hoped that India would be in the news only for this reason, celebrating this big £5 billion Indian-British trade deal. It's the biggest trade deal Britain has done since Brexit. Again, thanks to Brexit, able to do a trade deal. It's basically Australia, New Zealand, and others, all combined. It is a big trade deal. Involves a massive cutting of tariffs.
Yeah.
India, like 175% tariff on Scotch whisky and Irish whisky, like that being plummeting down to I think 75%, and then to 40% over a few years. That'll boost our industry. Cars. Possibly, it looks like opening up service industry, which is a really big issue for us. But lots of the headlines today are about this. Basically a two-tier tax deal. And that's what we're asking our audience about today, because Keir Starmer is accused of basically creating a two-tier tax system under which, effectively, as part of the deal, if an Indian company brings over workers from India on what they call temporary visas, and they take up to 3 years. I don't think 3 years is that temporary. Again, I think that's a pretty permanent kind of job there. They come over for the first 3 years. They will not pay national insurance contributions, that's the employer and employee, for that employee in this country. They will pay them in India. And any British employee who's taken by a British company to India will pay British tax here on that national insurance side. Now, that is going to make any Indian employee brought over here darn sight cheaper by a very long way. I would say best part of 15-20% cheaper, wouldn't they be, if you're not paying that extra tax on them for employers? In which case, that's a bad deal for us. But also, a lot of people are very unhappy. Like, why should you be paying less in? Now, the argument is that, but they're not going to be entitled to pensions. They're not going to be entitled to the stuff that we're paying in. Although, of course, it's actually a day-to-day tax. 17 other countries have the same deal. This isn't unusual. Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, though, said when she was Business Secretary, she'd rejected the deal because of this specific clause.
It's really interesting because some of this deal is actually very good, and it's actually very good for business. But I think the way that it's been handled yet again by the Labour government, the announcement was so badly handled that all we focused on yesterday were these national insurance contribution cutouts for Indian workers. And yes, that is going to affect companies and their choices to take on British citizens. But what we don't know is also the amount of visas that are going to have to be made available to Indian companies.
And we know that was something India was pushing for. Now, I mean, some of the analysis that said that they're going to make it easier for people to make it, it's basically an extension of the categories under which people can apply for work permits, but the total number can still be capped. But we don't have a history of actually doing that. That's the reality.
No, we don't. We're looking to open up even more visa opportunities for chefs and musicians. Yeah. Now, I don't think that they're on the shortage occupation list. I don't think that we're in general need of some extra musicians to pop over.
I would say fewer.
Absolutely fewer.
Fewer musicians, please.
It's going to be a real round number. It's going to be very, very difficult for the Labour government to say that they are interested in cutting net migration whilst also opening up opportunities for India, which is a large population.
Only at the beginning of last month, only a month ago, that national insurance rise came in for British, for everyone else in this country. I mean, and employers genuinely cutting people's wages or cutting what they would have been in terms of pay rise, not hiring new workers, even letting workers go because of that extra hit. But no, if you're an Indian company, you want to bring someone over. Now, as far as I can see, there doesn't seem to be a minimum wage level for these people, as in these are highly skilled specialists that they vitally need. Again, the fact that, again, we've had that big thing about Indian chefs and there's a shortage of Indian chefs in restaurants. Really? You can't train up some people here? I mean, we have a huge Indian heritage population here. You can't train up anyone who's already here? This seems to me apparently Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, wasn't privy to any of this. I cannot believe for a moment, given that India was massively pushing, this is the biggest trade deal they've done in terms of what what they're willing to cut in terms of tariffs. Very protectionist country. Yeah. We know they were pushing for this. It's been 3 years of negotiations. The Tory starters. There's no way in the world that they wouldn't be expecting to be able to send more of their people over. What I never understand is why countries think it's a good deal to send their brightest and their best to another country. I don't think that necessarily is a good thing for I want our best and best to stay and work here. But I mean, it's whether or not will our extra exports of whiskey and of cars will that be so good for our economy? Certainly the Scotch Whisky Association says this is a game changer for them in terms of the cutting of the tax. India is a huge market. We're going to be able to import more cheaply, lower tariffs, a lot, clothing goods and things. So I'm very happy for us to bought more from India than from China. Yeah. Absolutely. If they're competing against China and other Southeast Asian countries rather than competing against our manufacturers. We can't compete with those. Let's face it, slave levels of wages. I mean, come on, let's all stop pretending you can buy something, a a suit for 30 quid for a Saturday night out and an outfit, and that someone's not living in poverty who does it. But the question is, where is the balance right? And this feeling, and again, why Keir Starmer's political antenna didn't tell him this isn't going to go down well with people. You've done a big trade deal. You've done a big trade deal with the biggest, it's the biggest population country in the world now, 1.46 billion people. It's the fourth biggest economy in the world, rapidly, thanks to Germany's net zero madness, about to become the third biggest economy in the world. It's a growing economy. Absolutely, we want a trade deal with them. We want to be able to export to this country, especially having problems with it with China and with the US. Absolutely. But there's just that you should be able to say we're just not going to be able to do that national insurance thing. It's not going to fly with our voters. Yeah, and I think that was where his political nous is so failing him. None. He really doesn't, because you hike up national insurance contributions for employers in the United Kingdom, then you do this, and this only comes a few days realistically after the drubbing in the local elections of last week, which were won by a party who stand on a lower immigration ticket. Yeah. But you're saying, but it's fine, don't worry about all that, because we're just going to increase it from this country. Yeah. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I think if you were a sixth form student putting this forward, your politics teacher, would have you out the classroom. Very interesting. I mean, they are all basic sixth form debaters, aren't they? Well, I want to hear from you on this. Do you think this is a good deal? Keir Starmer is accused of creating a two-tier tax system over a £5 billion trade deal with India that undercuts British workers. And there is a significance here, was that even if 17 other countries have a similar deal, and certainly every country has a deal where the first year that you work in this country from abroad, if you're on a temporary visa, you don't have to pay national insurance contributions. You're not entitled to a pension or anything unless you're here 10 years. But India is so huge, and the huge number of workers likely to come from India is the concern for a lot of people. Is this a good deal for Britain? I want to know. Tell us why you think it is. Tell us why you think it isn't. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. We're going to be talking to Lord Hannan, Tory massive Brexiteer, big free trader, about this in a couple of hours' time. Be interested to get his thoughts. Let's also talk, and I'm very strange, I think this should be in the news. I think a lot of people say, but Madeleine McCann, and her potential abductor and we fear sadly killer, the man who remains the chief and only suspect in her abduction, all those many years ago, 17 years ago or so. German police had a whole load of evidence against a man who must be known when we broadcast for German legal reasons as only Christian B. A Sun investigation, which is to be broadcast at 9 o'clock tonight on Channel 4, but it's a Sun investigation. Fantastic work by some reporters. I know one of the chief reporters involved in this was on Mike's show a little bit earlier. They have basically got hold of the evidence of what the German police have against Christian B, and it shows extraordinary obsession with young children, about abducting young children, obsession with blue-eyed, blonde-haired children, children's clothes, a huge number of swimsuits, toys, guns, drugs, a hard drive of horrific imagery found at the... I mean, he is a convicted paedophile and rapist. Let's call him what he is. Yeah. At his sort of abandoned building he had. Masks, chemicals, guns, as I say... there's a hard drive of pictures which he had buried with his dead dog in a building site that he'd bought, found underground, which the police have yet to release. But I mean, the raft of evidence is extraordinary. Now, Christian B has not been charged with this crime. He has pleaded. His lawyers say that he is not responsible for the abduction of Madeleine McCann, but he remains the chief and only suspect in this case. It's just, but this evidence is chilling. It is absolutely chilling, and I think anybody looking at it is just going to shiver when they see things like swimsuits and children's toys and photographs.
I
had
just
75 kids swimming costumes because that's normal.
Yeah, but why have the German investigators kept this secret for so long? There is an awful lot of information that they've had that none of it has ever been shared, and I don't quite understand why this investigation.
But I suppose again, if you haven't charged, and again this information, like we don't hear the evidence until in a case comes to court. But I mean, this man is in prison, but for various other charges. I mean, rape, and since he's been in prison, the evidence they found, which they're able to convict him of paedophile charges as well. I mean, he talked in some of this. There are some Skype chats captured on his computer records, and he's Skype chats with other paedophiles, and one of which he said he wanted to capture something small and use it for days. It's so horrific. I can't imagine what Madeleine's parents would go through hearing of this, but. We're not getting answers, and I think what we want is an answer either way. And I think for any parent, I've always said this thing, look, I wouldn't have left my kid let her 3 children unattended. I'm sorry, I still think that was unforgivable, but no one deserves this as the punishment for such a stupid thing to have done, a risky thing to. I mean, if there'd been a fire, for goodness sake, I've always held out. If they'd been working class or not, a nice middle class couple, they'd have been prosecuted for that. It's as simple as that. But what's happened is so awful, and I think needing to know answers, and especially after all those cases, particularly Austria and America, where girls have gone missing for decades, and then been found alive. That you could never stop hoping. You could never stop hoping as a parent on searching.
Yeah, and that's it. And they deserve some kind of closure either way, I think, with this. It's been ongoing for such a long time. There has been hopes being raised, that there were sightings, and you get all of that kind of stuff. You're living it all of the time. And also it affects the other children in that family as well. And I think that we always forget that there are other kids in that family.
Exactly.
They need to be able to.
And they're now
live
18. Aren't they? They were babies, weren't they?
They were babies at the time.
I remember my daughter was 6 months old when that case happened. I remember, and looked same haircut, same hair colouring, say everything, and it was just sort of it just cut. So I think so many parents, it cut very close. With loads more to talk about on the show, but I just want to get to this new law coming in, meaning that criminals who refuse to attend sentencing hearings, so already found guilty, facing sentencing hearings, could face up to 2 years behind bars. Those who would not be deterred by that, because they're going to face like 40, 45 years or life behind bars, can lose various privileges in court. I don't think this is good enough. This isn't what I want. I want them dragged to the court, muzzled and handcuffed, whatever you have to do. I want them in court for the sentencing hearing, full stop, nothing else to discuss.
When I saw the headline, I was thinking, good, this is good. And then you look at the detail and it's like, it's just extra years and a few
What's an extra 2 years
nice things in prison.
40?
No, I need them in court. That's
you don't get the choice. You're convicted. You're guilty, man or woman. You're in court. Nothing. Again, genuinely, we will literally tie you. We will have you just tied up with a gag on. You're going to be in there, and you are going to hear what the victim's statements are.
Booth,
absolutely,
so that no one else can hear the ranting, and it's piped into them very loudly, so they cannot 100% get away from it.
That's what we would do.
Absolutely.
But then she worked in the Home Office. 10:24 is time. I want to hear from you on all the topics we are talking about, but in particular about this 2-tier tax system, which Keir Starmer is accused of creating with its £5 billion trade deal with India, undercutting British workers, or is it a great deal? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
sort of people that we've had standing for us up and down the country, by and large, are talented, able, driven people who desperately want best for their country. Now, as I say, there will be mistakes made. Some people might find the workload is huge. Though I've never seen that many councillors who are hospitalised through overwork. Yeah. But I think that there is that drive and that ambition is there, and there is a can-do attitude.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pearson also with us, and let's get some of your messages coming in about this new £5 billion trade deal with India. Does it undercut British workers by creating a two-tier tax system? Thanks to two-tier free gear Keir. What were the other names for him? I mean, the man really does lend himself to some wonderful lines. Is this a good deal for Britain is what I'm asking you. Barry says, UK workers need jobs, especially in IT. As a programmer seeking work, I can't compete with millions of Indians getting an unfair 15% less in employers' NI. There you go. Exactly. Jeremy says, imagine if that was done from white British workers. Pay no national insurance if you employ ethnic British people. It wouldn't be allowed. It simply would not be allowed. A lot of capital letters in that message, understandably. P says, that's me not working anymore overtime. I'm not busting my gut to be a second-class citizen. Michael says, Starmer needs to be properly grilled about these deals. Read the room, Keir. How out of touch is he? How could he do this now? We all want good trade deals, but we can't handle any more people. It will be more people. And I say we're going to talk to Lord Hannon later. I know he's a big free trader, and he's like, well, you can still have a cap on the number of people. Do we trust Keir Starmer on a cap on people? I'm sure this is going to come up at PMQs later today, given that Kemi Badenoch has gone in hard on this. Samuel says, final nail in the coffin for our once beautiful country. And Benjamin says, Starmer and Labour are hell-bent on destroying the UK. This is yet another example. So you're not keen. Let's go to the phone lines. Tony is in Hull. Hello, Tony. What do you want to say?
Yeah, good morning,
Julia.
Good morning, Claire. I'd just like to totally agree with what you're saying, and I want my 30-second rant while being polite. What he's done there is, as you rightly said, brilliant trade deal. It's about time somebody got, what we want. But I'm not happy with the fact that we've got this two-tier system now. It's almost as though they're trying to provoke the British worker into carrying on like last year's riots and all that type of stuff. They're trying to break down things in an underhand way, and I just hope they know what they're doing, because they've got reform on the back door like there was last week. They're still doing tricks like this, and it's ridiculous.
You say ridiculous. Again, if their argument will be, look, 17 other countries have the same deal in terms of they're still paying national insurance, they're just paying it in India because they're not here long term. And British workers who go over to India, I don't know how many of them do that. I imagine rather fewer than if Indian workers come here. But British workers who go over, they pay national insurance back here instead of in India because they're paying into a system where they're going to basically, claim their benefits over the years. Yeah. So, I mean, does it make any difference if this isn't the only country this happens in?
I don't think it does. I mean, we've got our own problems at the moment. We don't need comparisons. We need to sort out our own backyard.
And is it the size issue? Is it because India is such a big country that the numbers you think may well be, even if they're capped, they're going to be at a sizable level?
What, and you believe the caps are going to be in place? I
know. I didn't even believe it as I said it.
Exactly.
That's the thing. This is the basic problem, isn't it? Whatever reassurance we get, you can go, oh, that sounds fine. None of it is worth believing because we can't trust a single word any of these governments have said for many years.
Well, you only have to watch the news, and whether it's left, right, whatever, you're branded as racist if you're speaking up for your rights in your country. There's just no common sense anymore. We can't trust them to keep our shorelines intact. We can't trust anything that they say. The people are not happy, and then when it blows up in the face, they wonder where it's come from, and then they use your right-wing ideology as an excuse for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. They're always surprised, aren't they? Tony, I feel your pain, mate. Thank you very much. Great call. Chris is in Epsom. Good morning to you, Chris. What do you want to say?
Morning, Julia. Morning, Claire. I got up this morning, the sun was shining. I thought, well, everything's going to be a bit better today. Then I turned mic on.
Posh? A lot of women have felt that way, but I didn't think it was...
not Mike himself, but the news on this Indian deal. Yeah. Let's just have a look at it. I've got a few things to say about it, and then we need to concentrate on the word eventually.
Yeah.
But the only upside for Labour, well, there's a couple of upsides and there's a downside. The upside for Labour is they've negotiated that Scottish whisky is going to drop from 150% to 40% and then 10%. Yep. So Scottish whisky, they're fabulous. Well, Labour's struggling because they're worried about reform taking Scotland and Wales. So that covers
I don't think reform will take Scotland. I think I don't think that. But Wales, but.
Well, I think I'll get a presence up there anyway. But if you look at what they've said, current car tax tariffs into India are 100%. Yeah. They will eventually fall to 40%. We've removed the...
I think they've got a timeline for that, though, haven't they?
Well, they haven't posted it. Okay. They've used the word eventually on all... This is what I wanted to point out. I haven't read it in detail, but they've used the word eventually, right, on every single tariff that they're talking about. We give away our 9.6% on clothing and other goods. Yeah. The national insurance. Now, they come here and there's no numbers. There's a reasonable cap. Well, what's that? As you said, it could be anything they bloody well want. The companies that are going to employ them have to pay a surcharge. Yeah. What's that surcharge? They haven't told us what that is. Because when they come here, they're going to be open to our NHS service. Because don't forget, in India, they got a massive problem with their health service because 60% of their doctors are not qualified doctors.
I believe it's a quarter of doctors in India claim to have qualifications which they don't actually have, and that's one of the issues about importing people. Okay, look, I'm going to have to move on because I've got to go to a break. I'm already overdue. But I think you're right. There are a lot of unanswered questions, and that's one of the good things. Kemi Baden, at least, was the business secretary. She said she was having to. This is a 3-year negotiation that she was involved in this deal. So hopefully we'll get a bit more detail about that coming up later on. Chris, really appreciate your call. Hopefully we get more. Call in again. On the same subject. 10:34 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be talking to Henry Hill, Deputy Editor at Conservative Home, about this deal and plenty more besides. Oh, yeah, is Boris Johnson the answer to Tory woes? He always seems to be the answer. I think if he's the answer, you're asking the wrong question. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk at the Home of Common Sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:36 is the time. Let's go to our next guest, Henry Hill. He's the Deputy Editor at Conservative Home and joins us now to discuss all things politics. A very good morning to you, Henry.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, so first of all, I suppose I want to ask you what you make of this new trade deal with India. Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, has been very critical of it. Says, look, I was business secretary. I was helping to negotiate this. It was 3 years of negotiation. It's not like a Labour achievement to get over the line, it is, but the Tories were involved in it. But I rejected this deal, this clause, where basically, you know, we would actually see a two-tier tax system where Indian workers brought over by Indian companies wouldn't pay national insurance for 3 years here in this country. They'd be paying in India. And same for reciprocal arrangement for Brits. But, of course, huge number more Indians coming to this country than Brits going to India. So it's Britain that loses out. Do you think it's a good deal overall, or would you have agreed to that particular aspect, that clause?
So a lot of it comes down to how this ends up playing out in practice, because the history of lots of British policy, including immigration policy, is full of things that were signed up to with one set of assumptions. And then 20 years later, we're standing here going, oh, my Lord, how on earth did this happen? So in principle, the national insurance deal makes sense. It's very common internationally to have rules that avoid double taxation. For example, if you're an American citizen, you are liable for American income tax no matter where you are in the world. But even America deducts the income tax you've paid locally. Yeah. The question is whether or not this ends up turning into a backdoor to facilitate essentially short-circuiting our immigration controls. So it's supposed to apply only to people who are basically on intra-company transfers, which means essentially you're employed by an Indian company and you're deployed in Britain for a few years. It makes life simpler.
Yeah, we have to know, how long had you been employed at that company? If they just hired you for a week and now they deploy you? Because it's going to be cheaper to bring someone over from India, even with, I know there's a surcharge to bring people and things, but we're looking at such huge numbers. We've got, in 2023, last year we got full figures for, and that was, you know, a bit of a boost year, but 250,000 Indians migrated to the UK, give or take roughly half on work visas, half on student visas. We know an awful lot of people on student visas then try and stay and can actually work here for a bit. We've got a huge number of people coming to this country every year from a huge country like India, with a population of 1.4 billion. That's going to dwarf the numbers that will be going the other way, isn't it?
Oh, I mean, of course it is, and this is always this was the same with the European Union. Anti-Brexit Remain activists would say, well, you know, Britain's gained the right to, you know, live and work in 27 other countries. And it's like, okay, but most Britons don't really want that.
Yeah, I'm not really looking to go work in Romania, thanks. I'm good.
And so that really matters on the reciprocity of any deal. But I think you're entirely right, because when you say intra-company transfer, what immediately springs to mind is somebody working at a big multinational company who wants to do 3 years in the UK office. But then you look at the jobs that this applies to, and it's chefs, it's yoga instructors. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think there are many multinational yoga conglomerates where you simply go and do your jaunt at the UK outpost of Yoga International.
It's a really big thing. Did you not know about that, Henry? Everyone knows about that.
I am hideously out of touch, as you know, as you can see. And you're right, because the question then is, okay, what if somebody simply hires somebody in India and then does this as an intra-company transfer, right? That's problem one. Problem two, what happens if they overstay? India is one of the worst countries for taking back people to whom we're trying to deport for overstaying their visas. So there's obviously a risk that this leads to bleed out and people ending up using this as a system to get here. Yeah. And once they get here, it's very difficult to remove them. The third question, what happens if these people do end up staying here, even legally, because there's no age restrictions on this visa? What happens if they end up staying here legally and then they get to retirement age and they haven't paid in enough national insurance to justify getting the state pension? Yeah. Right? Then what do the 3 years where they're paying Indian national insurance count towards their state pension entitlement? Yeah. If not, there's going to be potentially a lot of people, or at least some people, who end up here, staying here, and then get to the end of their working life, having worked in a relatively low-wage sector in quite an expensive country, and have not made the bare minimum provisions that we expect to justify giving them
Well, it did, and we know already that again, against all the lies that we were told for years by the Blairites and the Tories for years, that actually, this mass migration is a benefit to this country. Well, not if you're on, below, I think it's about 45k-ish, give or take, salary. You're not a net contributor, so you're taking more than you're actually putting into the system. I mean, there are so many concerns here, aren't there? I mean, again, we talk about the sheer numbers. That is the worry. Let's talk about the politics of it, though, because a lot of people are sort of wondering about the timing of this deal coming out before with news of these conflicts, these clashes between India retaliating for a terror attack they blame Pakistan for, which killed civilians, and retaliatory action from Pakistan as well. That this was sort of rushed out ahead of that because the difficulty of doing it politically afterwards would have been harder. But is this something, or is it a post local election attempt to sort of change the narrative? Do you think the timing of this is significant?
I think, if anything, the significance of the timing is probably that they knew where this was going to land and then waited until after the local elections, right, because they didn't want to have this row that we're having now in the week ahead of the local elections, where Reform UK were already forecast to do well, although not nearly as well as they ended up actually doing. I suspect that's probably it. Yeah,
indeed. OK, well, let's also talk about what's happening in the Tory party. Conservative Home, of course, is the website and the portal for the grassroots Tory activists. What are they saying about Kemi Badenoch's future? Because we've had Tory MPs muttering about how she would, even before those elections, she wasn't going to last through the second set of local elections. It was an absolute drubbing for the Tories. There's been a lot of criticism of Kemi Badenoch and whether she is the woman to lead the party. A poll from More in Common has suggested that the only party leader, not Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, the person who came second in that last leadership contest, the only person who could see the Tories get back into their lead over reform in the polls would be bringing back the one and only Boris Johnson. What do you make of that, and what do your members make of that?
So we haven't, we're just getting ready to do our next survey. We decided to let the dust settle after the local elections, but there will definitely be a Boris Johnson question in it. What happens if we call Arthur from his slumber beneath Avalon to come and save the party? I personally think, and I've put this in my editorial today, that it's a bit ridiculous. Boris Johnson is the Prime Minister who presided over the tripling of net immigration. Yeah, I know. Right? It's a remarkable testament to the triumph of vibes over substance on both sides in British politics, because Boris is detested by a lot of liberals and really loved by a lot of people who consider themselves right-wing conservatives, despite the fact that his agenda consisted of spending a lot more public money, taxing sugar, and tripling immigration.
Oh, and net zero.
Yeah, exactly, and net zero. And you read this amazing piece
from him.
He's a centrist
Friday
dad. Morning.
Centrist dad. He doesn't know how many kids he's got, but he's a centrist dad.
Well, he's maximally centralist and maximising his dadness as well. But if you read his piece on Friday morning in the Mail, it's an amazing bit of political illusion, because he says the public are going to get sick of Labour using European mass immigration to fix this. And you hear that, you think, oh, okay. Yeah. But then he doesn't mention that the Conservatives would do anything about immigration in any of the rest of that piece. Yeah. So his ability to walk away from any car he crashes is obviously of huge comfort to him. But I think that it, frankly, should be the opposite of comforting to anyone who proposes to be a passenger in something he's driving.
I once told him to his face that, unlike, I wasn't one of his many mistresses or wives, and therefore wasn't sort of foolish enough to believe any of the nonsense he said. And again, lots of the copies about ousted, forced out. The former Prime Minister forced out of Number 10 in 2022. There weren't enough Tory MPs, even the majority of 60, who'd be willing to serve in his government. That's why he was out. He actually had to resign because he couldn't form a government because he'd made such a hash of things. And everyone always forgets where the polls were, where they were heading when he was leader. Again, I do find this idea, this halcyon age of look at what you could have won. Just finally, in terms of the threat from reform, look, they're talking about how they're going to try and change things on local councils. Now, again, getting stuff done, saying stuff and getting stuff done, very different. It's going to be a big test for reform. And there have been, parties, big established parties before who've gone, well, OK, go on, you have your go. We'll see how well that works out for you. Reform councillors are basically being told to refuse to take training on net zero and diversity. You can only fire the UK or the St George's Cross flag and these English council buildings. Basically saying they're going to get rid of the DEI, the net zero officers, and get things up to speed. And I can imagine an awful lot of Tory voters liking a lot of that.
I can imagine a lot of voters in general liking quite a lot of that. I think the DEI and environment officers thing is going to be tricky, though, because the reason that they exist is because there's vast amounts of legislation that councils need to comply with. So if you just get rid of them, all that means is that these councils are going to be sued into the ground and waste an awful lot of council taxpayers' money losing court cases. So that's something that can really only be fixed from the centre. I think the biggest challenge for reform is actually there's a conspiracy of silence amongst all politicians around how local government actually works these days, which is that according to the County Councils Network, 70% of all council budgets on average are spent on social care and SEND, special educational needs and development, right? And those are policies set in Westminster over which the council doesn't have any control. So that's why bins are getting worse, fireworks displays are getting cancelled, streets are ugly, and voters blame councils because everyone says that that's the council's job. So I think a really interesting thing, if reform really wanted to be radical, and we're talking into proper, militant in Liverpool levels of radicalism, what would happen if a reform council simply refused to pay for these endlessly expensive taxis to school, right? And
for the special education needs kids,
Yeah. It said this has run out of control. This budget has quadrupled in the last 10 years. We're going to cap spending at what it was 10 years ago, and we're going to spend the rest on fixing potholes. Now, that would be a breach of its statutory obligations, and central government would be able to bring cases against it. But on the other hand, it would be probably very popular with a lot of voters, and crucially, it would highlight that the situation facing that council and most councils up and down the country is simply out of the control of the councils.
And untenable. Again, that's a 60% fall in funding for central government for those local government required services as well. Absolutely fascinating. Love to speak to you again soon. Henry Hill, Deputy Editor at Conservative Hope. Quick reaction from Claire Pearsall.
Well, Henry's always really good on the detail of all of this, and he's spot on when it comes to local government. And having sat on a local authority for 8 years myself, when you start looking at the books and you realise your statutory duties cost a lot of money. None of this is easy. There's very little left to cut.
But isn't there in total $1 billion going on taxi fares for kids?
Yeah, absolutely.
Education needs?
Then we need more school places for kids locally.
Absolutely. We're going to have to go quick break. Up next, we are going to be finding out what on earth is going on between India and Pakistan with Professor Anthony Gleeson. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
What, disgracefully, the government didn't mention in their statement in the House of Commons yesterday was anything to do with the movement of people. And it turns out that Indian workers coming to work in the UK won't have to pay any national insurance on the employer, nor will the employer. So guess what? If an employer in the UK can suddenly employ an Indian worker coming over and save themselves 15% national insurance. Duh, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work out what some employers are going to do.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. This is Talk. It's 10:51. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to our next guest, Professor Anthony Gleeson. He's a security and intelligence expert. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, I'm gonna need your help with a little bit of. Today is a Janet and John day, as we all last night saw the news before we went to bed about India and Pakistan exchanging fire in disputed Kashmir. Can you talk us through, where this all started and where it may be going?
It is a very complicated story, but basically India and Pakistan have fought 3 wars over the disputed territory of Kashmir between India to the north and Pakistan to the east, which is divided into an Indian-controlled area and a Pakistani-controlled area. And on the 22nd of April, there was an attack which killed 26 Indian citizens in the Indian bit of Kashmir. The backstory here is that in the view of India and Prime Minister Modi, just a few hours after signing that curious trade deal with Sir Keir Starmer, he launched this massive attack.
This is a revenge attack because they blame Pakistan for this terror attack.
They blame Pakistan, but in particular they blame the Pakistan intelligence services for nurturing and cherishing Islamist terrorists based in Pakistan-controlled Kashmir.
But we know that there is a problem with Pakistan intelligence and the Islamist extremism because, of course, they were very happy to look after, the likes of, God, my brain's gone. How can I forget the 9/11? I've got an absolute blank on my brain. Al-Qaeda leader, weren't they?
Absolutely. And we know that the chief Islamist, jihadist, Salafist group that India claims, and I think correctly claims, is being helped and nurtured by Pakistani intelligence, was originally funded by Al-Qaeda and no less a figure than Osama bin Laden. So in Indian eyes, what happened on the 22nd of April was an Islamist attack on India, on Hindu India, by Pakistan-supported Islamist terrorists. In the view of Pakistan, though, that is a provocation, and they say they had absolutely nothing to do with these terrorists, and the terrorists are as much Pakistan's enemy as they are India's. What makes this so serious, of course, is that we're dealing with a conflict, and a nasty armed conflict, between 2 powers who have nuclear weapons. And whilst people like me teach that if you have nuclear weapons, you're unlikely to get involved in a nuclear war, you can still be involved in a bloody conventional war. And the danger signal here is that India has not only attacked what it says are the strongholds of Islamist terrorists in Pakistan.
Although Pakistan said these were civilian areas, there's no evidence.
It says they're civilian, but the Indians also appear to have attacked areas in India to the west of Pakistani-controlled Kashmir. Now, that is extremely dangerous because if Pakistan proper, if I could term it like that, were to be attacked by India, the Pakistani government would be forced to retaliate. And so you could get the build-up, which could end, in theory, I don't think it will happen, but could end in theory in a nuclear war in that part of the world.
I mean, let's bear in mind, America, Britain, France, we're all nuclear powers. Russia is a nuclear power involved in Ukraine, and we haven't seen nuclear weapons being used in any of the conflagrations we've been involved in. So it's not a certainty if these two powers go to war, but there's that concern that there is so much sort of bitterness and feuding between those two countries, and between, and you've got the religious aspect to this as well.
And we need to be mindful, Julia, we need to be very mindful of that here in the United Kingdom.
I was just going to come to that, actually, in terms of we have huge populations of people of Indian and Pakistani heritage in this country. We have seen issues before, haven't we, in the last couple of years, of sort of internecine battles breaking out in some towns and cities. Is there a concern that rivalry could spread to Britain?
Well, there is so much on the plate of MI5 and the counter-terrorist police at the moment. I mean, we're very worried about what Iran is up to. We're obviously worried about Russia and Russian sabotage. We've not heard the end of that story. Yeah. And now the feeling that if there is a full-scale conflict of some sort, though not necessarily a nuclear one, between India and Pakistan, the communities, the Indian and Pakistani communities in the United Kingdom will want to get involved. And I think many British Pakistanis will be anxious about the trade deal that Sakir signed yesterday with India, because, of course, India is led by Mr. Modi, who is a very, very fierce Hindu nationalist. Yeah. And it is the struggle between the Muslims and the Hindus that lies at the whole root of this almost 80-year-long strife between these two very powerful countries. So Britain could be on the receiving end, and it's absolutely vital that our security authorities keep their eyes on what's going on in the UK, and that
I love it. I love it when we import these problems and makes it our problem. I'm pretty sure that when that is an issue, and I think it's a when, not an if, I really do fear that, the people who involved will be blaming Britain because it was British rule of the Indian subcontinent and our partitioning of the countries, and that's created all the problems. So it's all our fault anyway.
Yes, but of course, what should also cause us concern is that President Trump has said that, or indicated that he thinks the conflict between India and Pakistan shouldn't last very long, and he is prepared to turn his great mind to sorting it out.
Oh dear.
Well, there are those who will look at his promise to sort out the conflict in Ukraine, and those who will look at his promise to sort out the conflict in Gaza and say, oh my God.
Maybe he's going to take over Kashmir and he's going to build some casinos on it. I don't know. That was his plan for Gaza. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of people think Trump really has lost the plot, and the dangers of an American president who's not sticking by the rules, who acts like he's the big, strong man. I'm sure myself that influences Modi and encourages him to take this very strong line. Yeah.
Well,
Pakistan.
Let's hope some cooler heads prevail. So appreciate you taking the time. Great to have your expertise, great explanation, I think, for most of us who are not up to scratch, up to speed on this. Professor Anthony Glees, security and intelligence expert. Thank you very much. Obviously, the concerns that this spills over here. I'm going to get Claire Purcell's thoughts on that coming up. We're going to talk more about that trade deal. Is it a bad deal for us, especially with two-tiered tax systems? And a huge number of Indian workers coming over here are cheaper. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. That is Talk.
You said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this. I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls. You know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust polls, and I don't like polls because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh,
so
I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Actually, I must be back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or on your connected device, it is absolutely lovely to have your company. And if you're watching, you get to see the wonderful, the beautiful Claire Pissell, former Conservative government advisor, in her sparkly jacket. I'm very sparkly for a Wednesday.
Well, I thought I'd jazz it up for the midweek.
It just felt like a sequiny, sparkly kind of day, people.
Why not?
She's celebrating the trade deal with India.
That's clearly not what I'm celebrating.
Just thought I'd wind you up there. So much to talk about. We're going to be talking more about that trade deal with India. In particular, Keir Starmer being accused of creating a two-tiered tax system over, it's quite hard to say that on a Wednesday morning, over this £5 billion trade deal with India. I'm all in favour of the trade deal, cutting the tariffs. They've got a lot more on us than we've got on them, but they're a bigger country, massive, big expanding market. Let's sell them a load of stuff. That's good for us, right? However, do we think it's a good idea that they'll be able to send people over here who are just working for their companies? Well, for how long are they working for their company in India? 3 years minimum. They won't be paying their national insurance here. They'll be paying it back in India. Same rule for Brits. But given that last year, well, 2023, 250,000 migrants came from India alone. Half of those on work visas, half on student visas. Bearing in mind you can work for 2 years after your student visa. Realistically, how many people would actually be affected by this, and would it be anything close in terms of Brits getting the same deal in India, or is this now just a two-tier tax system? Just a month after those national insurance hikes for British employers, for British workers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Is it a good deal for us? Tell us why you think it is. Tell us why you think it isn't. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost one standard network rate message. I say this in my sleep sometimes. I just say calls cost one standard network rate message. Message on YouTube is, of course, free, as is X as well. Other topics we're going to talk about in this hour, including obviously the India-Pakistan conflagration, and I hope that that's not going to spread to a nuclear war. Plus a review of the police response to last summer's Southport riots. This is the latest one by the Chief Inspector of Constabulary. It's concluded that there was no evidence of the disorder being coordinated by extremist groups, despite all the claims by many on the left and by the government. Also criticised the police there for a complete lack of preparation, particularly after the 2011 riots that we saw after Mark Duggan's death started in London, but also failing to keep up with the risks posed by social media. People being able to spread the word very quickly. Also, bombshell evidence found at the lair of Madeleine McCann's suspect Christian B, as he has to be known for legal reasons, is set to be revealed for the first time. An investigation by the Sun, an extraordinary investigation by them. It's going to be broadcast at 9 o'clock tonight on Channel 4, but it's all work done by Sun reporters. It's laid bare the damning haul found in a German police search of property owned by Christian B. And I have to say, it really, as a parent, it just makes a shudder go down your spine. Plus, the grooming gang scandal is being weaponised for political reasons. That's what Downing Street has claimed. This after Labour Minister Lucy Powell was forced to apologise after she accused a Reform commentator, that's Tim Montgomery, former founder of Conservative Home, of engaging in dog whistle politics, simply about on Radio 4 show speaking about a recent TV documentary about the grooming gangs. And also Donald Trump meeting with Mark Carney in the White House yesterday told him never say never. This after the Canadian Prime Minister insisted that his country is not for sale. The US President doubled down on his threat of annexing Canada as the 51st US state, as the pair met for the very first time since Carney was elected as Prime Minister. All that, plenty more besides coming up. And Claire Pearsall, as I say, is still joining us in her sparkles. Just want to give you a chance to come back in on that breaking news from last night across a lot of the media today. These dozens of people killed as Pakistan and India have exchanged fire in disputed Kashmir, but Pakistan actually going into Indian territory, not just disputed Indian-controlled Kashmiri territory. Yeah. It's a very complicated story. We've just had, I think, a fantastic explanation from Professor Anthony Glees of what is going on here. There's no doubt these two countries, there is no love lost. You've got the territorial disputes. You have got the religious aspect to this. But there is a real concern, not only that this could spill over into a hot war, a real war, indeed a nuclear war, they're both nuclear powers, but also, as he touched on as well, and you and I touched on earlier, the concern that this could become an issue back at home on British streets.
Yeah, and I think that's what's concerning the majority of people now is what are the implications for the United Kingdom. And this comes with the news recently that a Pakistani national was deported for threatening to blow up Blue Water shopping centre and the Ministry of Sound nightclub in London.
I'm just surprised that anyone has been deported. That just blew my mind. Are you sure that's true?
Last year. I won't give you the dates on that. Last year. So you know that there are pockets over here of people involved in terrorism.
More than pockets. I'm sorry, there's more than pockets.
Yeah, more than pockets. All right, there are a large number of people in this country wanting to do us ill. So I think that there are concerns that this is going to spill out onto the street, and how far that goes and how much it's going to blow up.
My issue, again, we think about the crackdown on Southport rioters and even people just wrote posts and things. I'd love to see what the crackdown again, but I think we're going to have two-tier policing and two-tier justice again. We've got 1.9 million people of Indian heritage in this country, 965,000 people born in India, 3% of the population of this country is Indian, and about a million people in this country from Pakistan as well. There's a lot of people. We've got a lot of people concentrated in particular towns and cities, particular neighbours, again, because people aren't being diverse and integrating. We've got people just living often in quite parallel lives to the established British communities. Anyone who gets involved in this, who is not a born and bred British national, I say bye-bye to. I genuinely, you want to come here and act out an internecine bit of warfare from where you are from? Bye-bye, you are not welcome here. Bye-bye. Literally, bye-bye. We literally take you to the airport as soon as you're convicted. Bye-bye.
And there'll be a lot of people using this as a perfect excuse to stoke up even more trouble in their community.
We've imported way too much of this stuff already, in my view.
Absolutely, and they're going to use it as an excuse to fire it up. So if they're going to be so adamant they want to fight the cause for whichever country they belong to, then they should go back. It's quite as simple as that.
Absolutely.
But returns to both India and Pakistan are very, very difficult because both governments don't wish to take those people back home.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, look, let's talk about the biggest topic of the day until that, obviously, was this big trade deal. I mean, should be hailed as a great, absolutely fantastic achievement after 3 years negotiations started under the Tories. Post-Brexit, by the way, Keir Starmer, I know you don't like it, but the EU doesn't do deals very easily. This is one of the biggest deals India has ever done. To get a trade deal with a country that is the 4th biggest economy in the world, rapidly, because thanks to net zero going to be overtaking Germany as the 3rd biggest economy in the world. a population of 1.46 billion people. There's a huge market there. Get a very, very protectionist country. Got a lot of tariffs. I said 175% earlier. It was wrong. 150% tariffs on things like whiskey. Scotch Whisky Association say, look, this is a game changer for them. Those tariffs are going to go down to 75%, then down to 40% over a few year period. That's going to be massive. They say huge extra export possibilities, more jobs here in Britain. We're going to see cutting of tariffs, and we've got much lower tariffs on Indian goods coming over, on manufacturing. That will mean cheaper goods for us, not undercutting our own industries. We can't compete already with China and India and Bangladesh on cheap clothing. That's just not an option with the wages that they pay and the standards of the factories and things. But the big concern that's been raised, and no doubt Kemi Badenoch's going to raise it at PMQs at midday today, as a former business secretary, she said, look, she rejected elements of this deal. The reason why she couldn't get it across the line when she was business secretary is because of this two-tier tax system, whereby an Indian company can take an Indian employee they've already got on the payroll and bring them over to the UK, and for the first 3 years they are here, they would not pay national insurance in this country, they would pay it back in India. Likewise, a British company taking a British worker to India, they would continue for those 3 years to pay national insurance, not tax, but national insurance back here. Seems reasonable. 17 countries we've already got that deal with. Certainly for all countries, anyone coming here as a temporary worker for the first year, you pay your national insurance equivalent in the country of origin. The difference here is there are so many more Indians than there are Brits, so many more Indians who come to this country. In 2023 alone, 250,000 people migrated from India to the UK, half on study visas, they're allowed to work after us, half on work visas. Will these people coming here be a few hundred high-level, high-skilled workers who've been working at a top Indian company for years? They're coming over on secondment to the London office, and then they're going to go home. They're going to be net contributors, lovely jubbly. Or, as you pointed out earlier, if you look at the list of jobs that people can do to arrive on that system, I'm not sure it's looking good. Tell us the groups of people involved.
Well, I think Henry Hill highlighted one that I hadn't thought of, which were yoga experts.
Yoga instructors, yeah. Big shortage of those, was it? Chefs
and musicians. The economy is going to fall apart otherwise.
We need chefs, musicians and yoga instructors. I mean, basically that is the future of our economy. That's
the Islington crowd taking care of, isn't it?
But basically these are not going to be necessarily highly skilled people. No. And the question is also, how long have they worked for that Indian company? Because you could just hire someone and a week later ship them over, and then they're a cheap worker compared to Brits.
They are. And also I've been looking into a little bit more of the details surrounding visa conditions, and what I cannot see is whether they are going to be allowed to bring dependents. And this is what
I assume
and you would assume you would, and other countries allow you to do that. So is there going to be a cap on the number of visas? I think that's a big fat no. Is there going to be a cap on the number of dependents coming over? I also think that that's now going to be a big fat no. And also another interesting part of it, in 2022, Indian nationals paying national insurance in the United Kingdom, the total was £500 million. That was how much they were bringing in. So if you're going to lose that, it coincidentally is the same amount that the farming tax is going to bring in. So I think that farmers are now paying for Indian workers.
Yeah, and again, I can understand if it was just temporary, but 3 years doesn't feel that temporary to me.
It's quite a long time.
That feels like quite a permanent job. That's not they're over here for a year, is it? And this is the thing, we've got at the same time, we've got these, I mean, it's like the 19th of May, there's this EU summit, and there's a lot of talk about moving towards having this sort of free movement effectively for young people for up to a year or whatever it is to travel, work freely in other EU countries and EU countries to come here. And again, with all these, is it just going to be a year? Is there going to be a cap on numbers? And how these things have a habit of just getting bigger and bigger. Do you think this was just Keir's time? They just wanted to get this trade deal over the line, particularly with the pressure of what's going on in terms of the trade war, the tariff war being fought by America? That this is, America's the biggest market for us as a single market, the EU as the biggest bloc. But in terms of growing markets, Southeast Asia is where it is at, India in particular. It's a good idea for us to have good trade relationship with them. Service is going to be very important as well. It's a big part of our service industry. But I think the main thing is, and from the couple of calls we've already taken on this, and we'd love to get more on, if you give us a call, 0344 499 1000, your thoughts on this. No one trusts whatever the government says about this. No, the Tories can't be trusted, the Labour can't be trusted when they say, oh, we're going to put a cap, or when they say we're not going to do this and it won't be a load of people. They've lied about everything from opening up to Eastern Europe onwards. Every single thing that every government has said about what they're going to do and what the risks are and the benefits are from immigration has been a lie. I mean, every single thing. It's been untrue.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's so elastic, it's ridiculous, but it's loose elastic. It never goes back the other way.
No.
So you stretch it out and you stretch it out. You accrue more people into it, and I don't think that you can blame anybody for saying no one's going to do this. The one thing I do have to give the Conservatives credit for is the trade deal was pretty much ready to go.
Yeah.
It was only that we didn't want the visa conditions we weren't going to accept and the national insurance cutouts we weren't going to accept either. So it was already there. So I do think that Kemi Badenoch needs a little bit of credit for that.
And Liz
now
Truss is the one, as International Trade Secretary under Boris Johnson. She got the ball rolling on an awful lot of these deals. Bear in mind, you couldn't do these deals if we were still in the EU.
Precisely.
You're welcome.
We know that.
You're welcome. But again, I never understood this holiday. We're going to take back control. We're going to limit people being able to come from cheap labour from Eastern Europe, which is basically... We don't have an issue with, highly skilled bankers coming here and spending a load of money here from France and Germany. Great. Come on in, the water's lovely. It was people coming over and living 10 in a house from Romania and Poland was the issue. Now, many people have settled here, made lives here, and actually, completely and utterly, assimilated and key parts of many of our communities completely. But no one thought when we closed down that route from you, I know what a good idea is. Let's import a load of people from the Indian subcontinent, which is what we actually did to replace those people. Because cheap labour is what business wants, and business are the people who give the money to political parties. That's what happens.
Exactly, and you can see that is going to encourage a government to look at what is your bottom line, how are you going to increase the productivity of this country? Oh, well, let's just import it because we can do that really quickly.
That's what they do, and of course we're all supposed to benefit. Of course we don't. GDP per capita doesn't might appear sometimes to go up, but actually it's just being shared out. It's and again, a few people at the very very rich people completely distort those numbers. Let's talk about something completely different. We're going to be talking a bit later about Madeleine McCann and the evidence. There's 8 pieces of disturbing evidence against Christian B. But let's talk about criminals here. A new law basically being introduced, basically providing something that Rishi Sunak said he would do, among the many things he didn't get round to before his snap election that he didn't need to call. But Labour are going ahead with it. They'll get Tory support for this, but more jail time for criminals who refuse to attend their sentencing hearings. Found guilty, you're going to be sentenced. You're already a guilty man or woman. You're going to basically face up to 2 years more behind bars, or losing, because if you're on a long sentence, you're not going to be deterred by that because you're serving 40 years. What's 42 years? And anyway, you only serve half it. Who are we kidding? You're going to basically lose a load of privileges behind bars. We were saying earlier, I don't think that's enough. If you refuse to attend your sentencing hearing, I don't think you get an option. You don't get an option about whether you go into your cell or not. So, or whether you get searched when you go into prison. You don't get a choice. You're a guilty man at this point. You will go to court. You will hear the sentencing remarks by the judge. You will hear the victim impact statements. You will have to face people. I don't care if we have to drag you kicking and screaming, if we have to put a gag on you and we have to tie you up and have 10 officers holding you down. You are going to be in court when you are sentenced. End of.
Since when did we give people the right to say, actually, I'm not going to go up and listen to it? You are convicted. Your liberty is being taken away from you. But don't worry.
Do as you're bloody well told.
Exactly. We don't want to hurt your feelings. You don't have to go in. Tough luck. I would also do the same. I'd have it soundproofed, piped in so they can hear every single word.
We'll just have a special court that's got that. We'll just ship you to that court.
Exactly.
You can scream as much as you want. In the court, no one can hear you scream. I don't care.
There you go. Why do we give these
You can just stand there and scream the whole way through the court thing. Even if I was, it was a member of my family who'd been murdered by you, I'd just stand there and watch you. Fine.
Exactly, but I think that people need to see justice being done.
Absolutely.
And if you're allowed to hide in the cells, no, it's not on.
Well, again, there was a case of the crossbow murderer, and he'd killed 3 women, mother and 2 daughters. His daughter being one of his ex-girlfriend. He then used the crossbow on himself and had basically become paralysed. He was in a wheelchair, and the judge said, look, he didn't want to drag him, a man, unedifying to have a man in a wheelchair being taken to court. I don't care. Self-inflicted wound. I don't care. I'd have dragged him out of the chair myself. I don't know why people... let's face it, what's the term? Pussyfoot around this stuff. We have got to get to grips. I think it tells you everything that's wrong with our justice system and the political system. They just don't get this stuff. You're in court, nothing to discuss, end of. Let me also just talk about things you can refuse to do, though, and that's to take training on net zero policies and on diversity, equity and inclusion. Newly elected reform councillors, 677 of them around the country, have been obviously told, you have to do your training on how to be green and also how not to be a racist and to be inclusive of trans people. I think they do actually all speak like that, those people. And there's very large women with brooches and stuff. You know what they all look like. And we've got them all. We've all had them. We've all come across them. And basically, across the country, and Nigel Farage has said, no, we're not taking training. I'm all for this. The reform MPs have refused to do that parliamentary training on how not to sexually harass your staff. How's that worked out so well for all the other MPs so far? Yeah. I'm always amazed at male students turning up at, I think it was at Cambridge University, a lot of other universities as well, having to go to enforced, basically, don't rape women courses.
Yes.
As if men need to be told that. It's so outrageous and patronising, isn't it?
I was very disappointed that in all my years sitting on a council, I was never offered training in net zero. So
all the people who needed it as well.
I couldn't have refused it. I wanted the option to be able to refuse it, and I couldn't. Look, if they don't want to go, they don't have to go. You've got to run a council. You need to understand what time you have to turn up for committee meetings, when full council is, how to get around the council chamber and where your seat is. Those are the important things. And then you look at the statutory duties
and your
of a council.
expenses forms.
I never had any. It was very dull.
That's what we like to hear.
Very, very dull.
Yeah.
I didn't earn very much on it. But those kind of things I think are really important. I think this is all window dressing, and there's not many councils that enforce councillors to go on it.
Well, I just find it also, and again, in buildings, I just think if you have to tell people not to be racist or sexist or homophobic or transphobic, maybe you shouldn't have had that person in the first place.
Yeah.
It's like people who've I'm going to have a nanny cam, I'm going to hire someone to look after my child in my home when I'm not there.
You don't trust them.
And I'm going to have a camera on them because I don't trust them. Don't have that person look after your child.
Exactly.
These things don't make sense. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that, but particularly about this two-tier tax system. Keir Starmer's accused by the Tories of creating over this £5 billion trade deal with India. Undercutting British workers, is it fair? Is it reasonable? Is it a good deal overall? I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Right now, though, it's time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning your weekend away in Munich. Why would you be going to Munich at the end of May? Well, to watch the biggest game in European football, the Champions League final. If it's as exciting as the Champions League semi-final last night, it's going to be a good match. We're also putting a small matter of £5,000 in your pocket to spend however you want. Have a listen.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation, and an uber-massive £5,000 in your hand. How about that? Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win that VIP trip, simply text the word football to 83338 by the 16th of May, 11pm. A text will cost you £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission. Or you can just send your name and number by post to Champions League Final Comp, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. It must arrive by 5pm on May the 21st.
Do not miss out on that incredible giveaway. That's from our colleagues just down the corridor at Talk Sport. Very good luck to all of you. 11:24 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Then I'm going to get your calls. This is Talk.
the problem with the Tories is the moment they get a bad result, the first thing they think of doing is regicide. Like, let's get rid of the leader.
Yeah.
How many leaders have they had in the last 20 years?
507, apparently.
I don't. Well, they've all had a go at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem for the Tories is, look, I think Robert Jenrick has shown himself to be a very capable politician. He's actually been almost like the unofficial leader of the opposition. Well, I completely agree with that. Kemi has maybe not been quite what a lot of people thought she would have been when they voted her to become party leader.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:27 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get to your calls and let's get to your messages all about this creation. We're told that by Keir Starmer of a two-tier tax system over this £5 billion trade deal with India that undercuts British workers. Coming up at midday, actually, we're going to be talking to Dan Hannan, Lord Hannan, who's a big free trader, big Brexiteer. He reckons this is a good deal. Not much to worry about, but we'll find out what Kemi Badenoch has to say at PMQs. Peter Carr will be watching, usual, so we don't have to. Bring us a summary of that afterwards. But some of your messages coming on this. Douglas says, this is yet another example of how incompetent two-tier free gear, no idea Keir is. That's it, no idea Keir. He's done nothing but hit the hardest working in our society. I mean, that's true. Tax on jobs, put it up, why not? Sean says our government is doing it so bad for Britain. Why break tradition of the last 30 years? And Daniel says, so instead of us paying for them to come here illegally, we are now paying for them to come here legally. Genius. At least they're paying some tax, eh? Nicola says this is by definition a two-tier tax system, with further details coming last night. It isn't as bad as initially thought, but it's still an extremely bad deal for anyone living here now. I also suspect that suddenly a lot more Indian companies will be set up miraculously. And Alexa says, great, so tax hard-working Brits and punish your own citizens. Also, so much for clamping down on legal migration. And Brenda says, I fear India knows exactly what they're doing. James is on the line. He's given us a call, as you can at any time, 0344 499 1000. James is in Kent. Oh, morning to you, James. What do you want to say?
Julia, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, Henry Hill actually stated this, but you didn't really sort of follow through on it.
Yeah.
The deal we have with America and with a lot of other countries, double taxation treaties, is you pay tax in the UK as an American citizen and your national insurance and all the other obligations. Yeah. But you then set them off against your tax bill in America.
Yeah.
And Jonathan Reynolds, solicitor of this parish...
business secretary, who cannot always remember whether he was or wasn't a solicitor. Yeah.
I think the balance is in favour of him not being one. But anyway, he said last night that Kemi Badenoch has a right cheek sort of accusing them of signing this deal because she signed a deal with Chile. Now, I looked at the UK-Chile double taxation treaty, and it is absolutely clear, just as Henry Hill said with the American one, if a Chilean comes here, a Chile citizen comes here to work, he pays tax, she, of course, pays tax, national insurance, everything else here, and then he is able to set it off against his tax bill in Chile.
Yeah, so the same as the US deal, yeah.
He doesn't come here and is exempt from paying tax and national insurance. And that is the big difference. And that, I'm sure, is why Kemi didn't want to sign the deal, because it was introducing a two-tier tax system.
But, as has been pointed out, 17 other countries, with 17 other countries, we have the same deal where for 3 years. Again, I've just got a query on the 3 years. Just doesn't seem like a very short period to me. For 3 years, that you'd have this national insurance sort of swap over effectively for Brits and for Indians.
It is quite reasonable because, I mean, big multinationals, banks, and so on, they will bring somebody over to do a particular job for 3 years, 3 or 4 years. Then he'll go on, to Singapore or to back to the States or wherever it is he came from originally. That's not unreasonable. You don't come over for 6 months because, unlike government ministers,
but it's understandable if we're talking about high-level people, senior figures in a big company, and they're moving around, and that's what they do. But that's very different because some of the jobs that have been mooted in this deal are not exactly essential personnel, are they?
That's a separate issue. But the main point, and yes, we have arrangements with 16 other countries, but they are not the same as the one that we're doing with India. The 16 other double taxation treaties we have, they are not exempt from national insurance and tax in the UK.
They're like the US deal.
They, like the US deal, like the Chile deal, like all the other double taxation treaty deals, which is the traditional double taxation arrangement. What we appear to have here, if we can believe what the government say, and, why wouldn't we, is that they're actually going to be exempt from national insurance and tax in the UK. And that is the huge difference with all the other deals.
And the crucial thing there is, it basically means that someone brought over by India is a far cheaper employee here than a British employee, or even indeed a British India of Indian heritage over here, or someone already living here from India.
No, absolutely. And if I mean, I was in the banking sector for many years, and there were people who sort of, were very internationally oriented, and, there were Indians working in the bank I worked with. They would come over, and they would be getting the same sort of salary here as any other employee, but they were also paying UK tax, UK national insurance, and everything else. And then after their 3-year contract or whatever, they would go on somewhere else in the bank. That is the big difference. We're just saying, no, you can come over here for 3 or 4 years, but you won't pay any tax or insurance.
You will pay tax, just not the national insurance.
All right, national insurance.
Okay, and is there an issue, as someone who's been in this sort of world, is there an issue, do you think, in terms of the numbers, where it's one thing doing a deal with, say, Chile or with America, where we're in similar sort of levels of industrial development and taxation levels, than with a country like India, which is a huge economy, 1.4 plus billion people, a big rising economy that actually, when you talk about the scale of people who are more likely to come from India to the UK as opposed to UK and India, that's when it becomes unfair.
Well, I think it is. And again, the arrangements we have with other countries, where we're quite happy, a big bank can say this chap is the best in the bank for doing this particular
he's got to
job.
come over,
We want to bring him in. But the employer has to put a case to the Home Office to get a work permit, to get a visa, a working visa. And if the Home Office says, well, actually, there's plenty of people, up the road in London who could do that job, so we don't really think you need to bring somebody all the way across from America to do this job. So that caveat should probably apply to these Indians coming over to teach yoga and so on.
Do you think?
But, if it doesn't, then that again is a huge difference between the arrangements we have with most other countries.
James, can we get you into the Parliament? Because you know a damn sight more than this than I think most of the MPs are going to comment on it today. I so appreciate your call. James in Kent, thank you very much indeed. Going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking about that new latest report into the police of the Southport riots, and also the unseen Maddie files, an extraordinary Sun investigation into the huge amount of evidence against the German suspect and only suspect remaining in the abduction of Madeleine McCann. That's Christian B. That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK on DAB+. On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:36 is the time. Let's talk right now to our next guest, Danny Shaw. He's policing, crime and justice commentator and joins us right now to talk about all things in criminal justice. Very good morning to you, Danny. Danny, can you hear us, my love? Danny,
yes, I can hear you.
Got you there. Great, thank you very much. Lots I want to talk to you about. First up, actually, let's talk about Madeleine McCann. And there's an extraordinary investigation by Sun reporters, which is actually going to be on a Channel 4 documentary tonight at 9 o'clock. But it's all work done by fantastic reporters at the Sun, looking into the I say bombshell evidence, as they describe it. It really is evidence which the German police have accumulated about the man they regard as the most likely Madeleine McCann suspect. It must be known for broadcast legal purposes as Christian B. And some of the evidence has been revealed for the very first time, and it is incredibly concerning, is it not? Bearing in mind, this is a man who's currently behind bars, serving for he's a convicted rapist and paedophile, but he is the man that the German police are convinced is the man who abducted, they believed sexually assaulted, and they believe murdered Madeleine McCann. Tell us about the bombshell evidence that's been uncovered.
Well, I think you're right, Julia. It is very concerning evidence, and it paints a picture of a deeply dangerous individual who is obsessed with sexually abusing children. And what they found, what they've uncovered in this investigation is evidence that German police found at a factory that Christian B bought in 2008. So a year after Madeleine McCann went missing from Portugal. She went missing in May 2007, you remember. And at this factory that Christian B had bought, they found children's clothes, toys, masks, chemicals, a hard drive of pictures, which German investigators have continued to keep secret. So we're not sure exactly what that contains. But there were also, I think, stories that have been written or articulated by Christian B, suggesting his obsession with snatching children. He describes abusing a girl, chats with other paedophiles that were recorded, child abuse images. So as a kind of treasure trove of evidence. Yeah. I would say that there's also a document that supports the fact that he was at a particular location where it is alleged. He made in essence a confession about taking Madeleine. So that
claims that she didn't scream. That was what someone he spoke to said. And there were question marks about had this conversation happened, but as an insurance document, isn't it, that he was where this man said he was. So there's some corroborative evidence.
That helps to support that. I would say that overall, though, a lot of it is what we would say is circumstantial evidence. It describes an individual that would have the motivation for snatching a little girl, sexually abusing her, possibly killing her, but it doesn't have. There's no direct evidence, as far as I can see, from what the Sun investigation has revealed. It may be that German investigators are just keeping that under wraps, or it may be, as I suspect, they don't have the direct.
Well, they haven't. I mean, he's been behind bars all this time for a rape, and now has been charged as a result of some of this documentation with paedophile charges. But and he's actually been found not guilty of another rape charge. And one of the women in the documentary says she's still convinced of, because he was found not guilty in a court of law. But they have not charged him with this crime. What has the reaction of the McCann family been? I mean, particularly bearing in mind that Madeleine McCann's little brother, twin brother and sister, are now, adults. It's all happened a very long time ago. Her disappearance. Family still holding out for the chance that she is still alive. This, certainly the police investigation by the Germans appears to suggest that she isn't alive still anymore.
Well, it must be absolutely heartbreaking for them. Every time there's a development, every time there's media coverage, it just must be absolutely horrendous. Every time they learn more and more detail, what we don't know is how much of this detail they've already been told privately by detectives and investigators. But clearly, having it all over the front pages and the media coverage must be horrific, because it doesn't bring Madeleine back. She's still missing, as far as they're concerned. They're still looking for her. And it doesn't bring them any closure whatsoever. And I think, this individual is in prison for 7 years. We're told that his sentence ends in September this year. So there's a bit of a race against the clock to ensure that he's kept in custody after that, because he's clearly a dangerous predator. There is an appeal, I think, against some charges for which he was acquitted last year. So if that appeal is successful, the prosecution appeal, then it's possible he could be held in prison for after September. Or the other possibility is that charges are brought over Madeleine's disappearance. But I do ask the question, why haven't German investigators done that already?
Yeah, well, they're certainly a lot more competent than the Portuguese police were in the aftermath of Madeleine being snatched, that's for sure. Well, we'll keep abreast on that. It's a documentary 9 o'clock tonight, Channel 4, but it's a Sun reported investigation. Fantastic work there. And again, bearing in mind, British taxpayers have been, British people, mums and dads have been following this for years. And British taxpayers have been funding to the tune of millions of the police investigation all this time. I know it's a story that's very close to an awful lot of parents' hearts. I remember certainly my daughter was only 6 months old when Madeleine was snatched, and some of those pictures of her, I've got pictures thinking, wow, this is far too, the resemblance I felt at the time was really uncanny, and a very disturbing story for every single parent. Look, let's talk about something a bit different. We've got yet another report into what happened in terms of the Southport riots, Danny. This time it's a report by the Chief Inspector of the Constabulary. This is Sir Andy Cook, and he's looking into how the police handled those riots, and he's concluded that there was no conclusive evidence that the disorder was coordinated by extremist groups, something that had been claimed at the time, mostly incited, he said, by disaffected individuals, influencers and groups online. But he also said that they were largely local people. Violence was largely unrelated to ideology or political views. It wasn't the far right, it was basically a bunch of thugs. Criticises the police for being unprepared, particularly in the wake of the 2011 riots, in the wake of Mark Duggan's death at the hands of the police. I remember covering those on a radio station in London, day in, day night as London streets raged. But also saying the police haven't kept up with the risks of social media. What do you make of this report?
Well, it's an important report, I think, from the policing watchdog. I think the most significant thing about it is that this concern that if this happened again and some dreadful attack, and there was huge concern and there was misinformation and disinformation being spread online, the police wouldn't have the wherewithal to be able to counter it. And Sir Andy Cook is basically saying, look, firstly, police need to be braver in speaking up to counter false rumours, misinformation and disinformation. They need to come out and sort of front up, and they need to say when something's clearly wrong or misleading.
And there's been already other reports saying that their police could have said an awful lot more than they did.
They could have said a lot more. I think Merseyside police took the advice of the Crown Prosecution Service locally at the time that they had to be more circumspect about what they said about Axel Rudikabana. And the second thing is the technology companies have to do more, and Sir Andy Cook is saying that the Online Safety Act needs to be beefed up to ensure that the companies that allow some of this misinformation to proliferate are held to task for doing so. That's easier said than done. But I think in the meantime, while we wait for legislation to take its course, the police really have to step up on this, and they have to do better at monitoring social media and understanding when rumours and speculation, and concern and misinformation is beginning to move towards something more
nip
violent.
it in the bud
The warning
earlier.
signs were there.
Yeah, but also see when there's feeling that there might actually be trouble. Again, a lot of people predicting it. It seemed to be the police completely surprised by it, which seems very bizarre. Let me ask you just finally, though, about the grooming gang scandal. Downing Street have claimed, in the wake of an exchange last Friday on the BBC between Tim Montgomery, now a Reform member, but he was a leading Conservative, on this programme, talking about the grooming gang scandal and the latest documentary about that. And he was interrupted by Lucy Powell, leader of the House of Commons, basically saying, blowing that little trumpet, are you? Let's play that dog whistle. Did not go down well in the audience then. It didn't go down well since. She's been forced to apologise. But Downing Street have now said that the grooming gang scandal is being weaponised. What do you make of that claim?
It was slightly odd after Lucy Powell sort of had to kind of explain her remarks and sort of try and set them in context.
In no way was I talking down there. So.
Yeah, and obviously some pressure I think had probably been lent on her by Downing Street, that they've now come out and almost backtracked and said, well, actually, the issue is being weaponised, is being used for political advantage. Look, there's a line here, isn't there? If people are concerned about a particular issue, be it grooming gangs or whatever it is, they're absolutely entitled to make that point, to campaign for an inquiry, to raise concerns about it. But there's also a line where people use an issue like that just to score political points, to make political advantage. We've seen it in all sorts of different contexts.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't what Tim Montgomery was doing at that time, though.
And there's a grey area there. And what people forget when they do that, and they just use a label like grooming gangs, is that there are people who are victims.
Yeah.
And that it gets bandied around like it's just some kind of subject, without forgetting they're real people so badly affected, their lives traumatized by that. I think Lucy Powell, that was I think it was misplaced what she said and in the wrong context, but I think she was almost trying to say that. And I think the concern, I think perhaps Downing Street is echoing this. Remember, this is about real people who've been affected.
I'm afraid I'm not going to concur with you on that one, because I just think it really revealed the whole, don't talk about this. It's the reason why those girls were victims, and girls are still being victims all this time on, is because everyone would just rather not talk about it. It's almost like the dirty secret. Danny Shaw, so good to get you on, talk about all of those big issues. Police and Crime and Justice commentator, thank you. Former advisor, actually, to Yvette Cooper before she was Home Secretary. Claire Pissell, do you want to come in on the grooming gangs issue? On that, again, I think some people are weaponising it. They are. Yeah. They're suddenly the only person who's ever cared about this issue. But I just thought it did betray that sort of Labour attitude, like, anybody who brings it up is just dog whistle and far right. Same accusation, by the way, people who were upset about the Southport attacks. It's just far right extremists.
That's right, and people come out with these comments, and when you listen to the clip, she was really snippy about it. It wasn't just something in passing. It wasn't part of a conversation. She deliberately made those comments.
Tim Montgomery's a good guy. He's a good guy.
Absolutely. And what he said in context, have you seen it? Because in local government, he was talking in a conversation about local government funding, and this is the reason why these girls were failed.
It was relevant to the conversation.
It was relevant. Have you seen
They weren't just talking about, do you want an ice cream? And he mentioned the grooming gang scandal.
No, it was a relevant part of the conversation they were having. She was very snippy, wanted to shut it down. The audience reaction, very, very interesting.
And bearing in mind, they're all the nice people. Those Media 4 people.
They are.
There was a sort of an intake of breath, absolutely.
Yeah, they were disgusted by it, and the fact is that the Labour Party have now had to go out and deal with this.
But it betrayed exactly the reason why this has been allowed to happen for 20 years, and why there isn't a public inquiry and all of that. It's because it's all too difficult, because they know they are absolutely complicit in what happened.
Yeah. Completely.
11:50 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk to our old favourite Ralph Scholhammer, waiting on the line to talk about what is going on in Germany and how did that Oval Office meeting between Donald Trump and Mark Carney go. This is Talk.
worries us in Reform UK is that we've got 4.5 years left of this Labour government. What damage are they going to do? I mean, we clearly are on the move. We're on the march, and the country is ready for us. I've got no doubt about that.
No question.
This country is going turquoise. We've already seen that with the council elections and this historic win in Runcorn and Helsby. But the point is, how much time have we got to sort of save the country? And that sounds, I know that sounds so dramatic. It's so real.
It is.
And what's happened now with this Indian deal?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:53 is the time. Let's go straight to Vienna. And Ralph Schollhammer, he's political theorist and professor at Webster University there. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. Great to be back on again.
Lovely to talk to you. Well, you know, we don't have enough conversations about Germany, but we're certainly going to have a conversation about Germany right now because you've got a new chancellor, although it didn't go quite as smoothly as Friedrich Merz might have helped. Tell us what happened yesterday and tell us a little bit about Friedrich Merz. Should we be welcoming him here in Britain or should we be wary?
Well, I think the same applies to every politician, and nobody wishes ill on him because if he succeeds, hopefully the country will succeed. Although the beginning was rather rough, to put it mildly. He was the first chancellor in the story of Germany since 1945 that needed a second vote in parliament. It's a secret vote for chancellor, and 18 members of parliament, who are also part of his own coalition government, apparently turned against him. Now, we don't know if it was from his very own party or if it was from the Social Democrats, who are his coalition partners, but that's not a very good start, and one could see his disappointment. It was quite entertaining, to be frank, because he already made plans to travel to Paris today and to Warsaw tomorrow. But technically, a second vote could only be scheduled for Friday. So they had to change parliamentary procedure in a very hasty act. So they could do another vote yesterday. So he could be saved from the embarrassment to go to Paris and to Poland.
Well, I mean,
and say,
it's still been a good few months since the election. When people talk about, oh, PR is such a good system, I was arguing, at least at the end of a general election, even in 2010, we had a coalition up and running within about 10 days. It takes Germany and most other countries, it's months, it seems, to put a coalition together.
Yeah, this is not so much what argue a problem of the system, because the system worked for almost literally 80 years without any kind of ruptures as you saw now. But there's a broader picture, I believe, that we have to take a look at, and that dovetails nicely with what's happening in the UK. Right? Usually every revolution is preceded by an institutional crisis. Germany is currently in an institutional crisis. I think if you look at the gains that reform made in the UK, that the UK is in its own way in an institutional crisis, the United States, pretty much all over the West. And the big question is, which governments will adapt to those crises and solve them, and which governments and which countries will be blown away by milder or maybe less mild forms of revolution. So I'm hopefully about some countries. I'm hopeful again about the US, about the Nordic countries. Not so sure about Britain, not so sure about Germany. I'm somewhat, hopeful about Austria, but this is where we are. We are now in the pre-revolutionary stage of crisis. Very
interesting. Well, one of the ways of dealing with it, of course, is when you get the threat from parties, and again, I don't think any of these parties are actually directly the same, whether it's Reform or the AfD in Germany or the National Rally, Marine Le Pen's party in France, is that often you end up with a system where you try and sort of make sure they can't stand. So we've seen the AfD prescribed as an extremist group. We've seen the leader of Marine Le Pen of the National Rally in France basically barred under the law after a fair, bang to rights conviction. Although again, why they only targeted her party over dodgy expenses, but barred from standing for the French presidency. She was odds on to win next time round. Do you think that the British institutions are going to target reform in a similar sort of way?
I mean, to a certain extent, I believe that most definitely many of the followers and the people who vote for reform feel targeted, and I don't think that they're entirely unjustified in feeling so. And while I agree with what you say, I would just maybe soften it a little bit in the sense that I never think that parties per se are a threat, because political parties are usually a symptom. A political party pops up if the existing party system or the existing parties do not have the required answers for the problems. I mean, I give you a very quick historical example. The labor movement, the social democrat movement, right? They popped up as a consequence of the Industrial Revolution, something that wasn't there before. Yeah. And the parties back in the day were not prepared for it, so new parties, new political movements emerged. If in Germany the Social Democrats and Conservatives would have done a good job in the past, there would be no AfD. If Labour and the Tories would do in their own way for their own constituents a good job, there would be no reform. If the Republicans in the United States and the Democrats, again, for their own side, would have done a good job, there would have been no Donald Trump. All of these are symptoms and not causes. And very often I believe the media, you, Julia, of course, a notable exception here, but I think the media very often is mixing up the cause and the symptom.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you. Again, their creation. But what do you think what could happen, what's happened in Germany, and indeed the attempt by Macron in France as well, where you actually bring the two centre ground, supposed, I think they're actually rather extremist parties, centre ground together to basically make sure you keep out the parties seen to be on the hard right, although, again, largely with policies which would have been considered completely normal 10 or 20 years ago. Do you think that could happen here in the UK?
Well, I think it would happen slightly differently in the UK because, again, British political history and British culture is slightly different from the continentals. But is there an attempt, let's say, by the status quo political parties to either ostracize or limit the influence, if you want, of new movements, and this in the British case, the reform movement? I think absolutely. I mean, the clamping down of non-mainstream views and opinions is happening in the UK as much as it happens in Germany, as much as it happens in France. I mean, this is a worrisome trend all over the West. I think we both agree that freedom of speech and freedom of conscience is not what it was 20 years ago.
Absolutely. And again, I always think with all these parties, and, same with Trump in America, how's that working out for you? Unfortunately, Ralph Schoenhammer, you have to come on again soon because time's against us. Didn't get to Donald Trump telling Mark Carney, first trip to White House since becoming elected, the Canadian Prime Minister, never say never over the possibility of Canada becoming the 51st state of America. And we'll talk to Ralph again, I'm sure, very soon. Up next, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be talking to Lord Hannon about that trade deal with India.
You said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this.
Yes.
I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls. When you do a poll to find out what people think. Like they say 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust polls, and I don't like polls because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh,
so
I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Actually, I'm actually back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is lovely to have your company. Also great to have the company still. Claire Pearsall, former Conservative Government Advisor, and her sparkles today. I could mention it. A very, very good afternoon once again to you. Lots more to talk about. Coming up in this hour, of course, we've got PMQs. It's just started. No doubt that India-British trade deal is going to be a key part of it. Usual rules. So we've got Peter Cardwell very valiantly watching it for us, and we'll get the highlights a little bit later so we don't have to watch the whole thing. But Keir Starmer has been accused of undercutting British workers and implementing a two-tier tax system after signing a £5 billion trade deal with India. It was announced yesterday that exempts Indian migrant workers from paying national insurance here for 3 years. Likewise, British workers going to India will be exempted for those 3 years as well. But is this a good deal or a bad deal for us here in Britain? Tell us what you think. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and then your message to 87222. You can also send us a message on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. It's of course free on X and free on our YouTube page as well. We're also going to be talking about a new poll by More in Common, which has found that if the Conservatives do want to beat Reform UK in the polls, then they need a new leader. Who was the only leader who could bump them up in the polls to beat Reform UK? You guessed it. One Boris Johnson. Yes, really well, we'll talk about that. Plus, Nicola Sturgeon, the former First Minister of Scotland, has refused to apologise to women wronged by her trans ideology policies. The former Scottish First Minister caused further outrage by insisting she'd always campaigned for the protection and enhancement of women's rights and recognised different views. Yeah, evidence to the contrary is pretty strong there, Nicola. Also, it's that time of week. We are going to get PMQs a bit later. Lots more to talk about. I do want to get more of your calls. I want to get more of your messages on that Indian trade deal. Is it a good deal for us? Is it not? First up, though, let's talk to a man who knows all about trade deals. He's a former advisor to the UK Board of Trade. He's a Conservative peer and was a big-time Brexiteer. Daniel, now Lord Hannon, joins us on the show. A very good afternoon to you, Daniel.
And to you, Julia.
Can I call you Daniel, not Lord? We had so many Lords on the show.
We're such old friends, Julia. If you can't, nobody can.
Oh, well, there you are. Thank you very much indeed. I should have checked with you beforehand. I know you guys like your titles. Anyway, look, a simple question I want to put to you about this trade deal. People are hailing a trade deal. We want free trade deals. We absolutely want free trade deals, or well, certainly better trade deals with, a country that's the fourth biggest economy in the world, heading to be the third biggest, thanks to Germany's net zero policies. 1.4 billion people, a huge market, a growing economy. I mean, thumbs up to all of that. But is this a good trade deal?
Yes, it's an extremely good trade deal for both sides. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about trade. It isn't a win-lose thing. It's a win-win thing. So this huge country that you've just described, moving from fourth to third place in the world, teeming, growing middle class, largest consumer class in the world, fastest growing, has never done a trade deal like this with anyone until now. India has come late and reluctantly to free trade. It's been very slow to open its markets. It has a few local trade deals. It has some fairly unambitious ones with Japan and Australia. This is on a different level. There'll be huge opportunities here in the services sector, in accounting services, environmental services, telecoms, and of course the abolition of tariffs, which works hugely to the benefit of both countries. We're going to be able to, for example, India is the biggest market for whiskey in the world. Yeah. It's been an issue for decades. So yes, a very good deal. Okay.
And we've got 150% tariffs on whiskey currently going into India. It's going to go down to 40% eventually.
Yes, exactly. And that is a massive gain. But by the way, a massive gain to India, right? Because it means that Indian whiskey producers will have to raise their game. It means that Indian consumers will have a much wider choice, just as cheaper textiles and garments here are a massive gain for us. And actually, a point that I haven't really seen anyone make about this deal, that when we buy cheaper textiles from India, they are not in direct competition by and large with UK producers. Yeah. They will be displacing other Asian imports, and particularly Chinese imports. Yeah. And so here is a way in which we have rejigged our supply lines away from China and towards a more stable democracy, not by imposing tariffs and making ourselves poorer, but by reducing tariffs and making ourselves richer.
OK, so all sounds fine and brilliant. How come the now Tory leader, as was Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch, says this isn't overall a good deal, they're all in favour of all of those things, but we've got this aspect which she said she herself had rejected a trade deal. It's been 3 years in the making, this deal, in terms of negotiations, because of this particular aspect, which has been accused of creating a two-tier tax system under this £5 billion trade deal, which basically undercuts British workers. Indian companies can bring over Indian workers to work in Britain. For 3 years, they will not be paying national insurance here. They'll be paying it back in India. Likewise, British companies can take a British worker to India. They will not, for those 3 years, be paying the national insurance equivalent in India. They'll be paying it back in the UK, which seems like a fair exchange, apart from, of course, the massive population disparity, 1.4 billion versus, 70 million. The number of people who come to work in Britain from India. I mean, we had in 2023, 250,000 Indian migrants arrived in that year alone, about half on work visas, about half on student visas. Bearing in mind, after the student visa, you can work for 2 years. Actually, there'll be far fewer Brits who will go to India, far more Indians who would come to Britain. And this is just going to undercut British workers because they're going to be cheaper employees than Brits here already, or indeed even Indian nationals here already. So Kemi Badenoch reckons it's not a good deal. Is she wrong?
Yes, I think she'd have done better to have claimed credit for a trade deal that she was in large measure responsible for agreeing. This is a massive Brexit benefit. We are now invested in the prosperity of this fast-growing and enormous country, and they are invested in ours. But let's deal with the point about the national insurance exemption, because I think there's a massive misunderstanding about this. The first point to make is, look, everything, sadly, is now being seen in the context of these vast immigration figures, and I'm as against that as anybody else, and I'm sure all of your listeners are, right? So, of course, we should get on top of immigration, and of course, we should stop people overstaying student visas and all the rest of it. That is nothing to do with this deal. It's a trade deal. It has nothing to say about migration. The point that you're making, or the point that the critics of it are making about the national insurance, it is a normal thing among almost all countries that when you are posted abroad as an intra-company posting, because you're paying national insurance or equivalent social security in your own country, you don't pay it twice. This is not unreasonable, since you're not allowed to claim pensions or related benefits in this country until you've been paying in for at least 10 years. So all Indians already have that, as everyone else has, for up to 12 months. That exists now. And there's no evidence that it has been undercutting British workers. We then have a series of reciprocal deals with dozens of other countries in the world that extend that period for reasons of convenience for 2 or 3 or 4 or in some cases 5 years. India has negotiated 3. We have that deal with Mauritius. We have it with Jamaica. We have it with Japan. We have it with Chile. We have it with Kosovo. No one has, to my mind, ever suggested, let alone proved, that is causing an undermining of British.
But my understanding, actually, a caller earlier who's working in banking has said this is different from the deal we have with other countries, because in those it's about preventing double taxation. So you basically you pay your tax here, but it's basically sort of written off against your tax you might owe in your home country. This is about not paying the tax here, which is different.
No, that is what all Indians do at the moment, and everyone else, right? All South Africans, all Jamaicans, all Pakistanis, whatever, for the first 12 months.
Yeah, but we're ignoring the first week. The 3 years is different.
Right.
3
So
years
all we're
is
talking
three
about
times
is,
as long.
Sure, which loads of other countries do. And the calculation that we make in all of these cases, when we're deciding how long, is yes, there is a small tax loss to the Treasury because they're no longer paying the extra double taxation, versus how much extra economic activity are they generating by being here, right? We're talking in large measure, because we're talking about companies like PwC, we're talking about companies that bring in skilled workers. We're talking above all about IT workers.
So we're highly paid, highly skilled professionals. When you say that, and yet on this list apparently are chefs and yoga instructors. I'm not sure we've got a shortage of those, have we?
No, that's a different thing. That's
okay.
That is about extending the number of categories where you can apply for a work permit.
Yeah.
Really important to stress this. It does not affect the number of work permits issued. It simply It simply changes it extends the number of. And by the way, I don't see better curry as a bad thing, right? If we can get qualified chefs who are paying into the system and paying their taxes, that is not a bad thing.
I don't know. I would have thought we've got 1.9 million people of Indian heritage here, 965,000 who were born in India are already in the country. I'm thinking some of them might be able to train up to be a decent Indian chef.
Sure, but
we don't need to import more.
Julia, I have to keep coming back to this point, because I don't want you to manoeuvre me into being in favour of kind of open borders, which I'm not, and which I don't imagine anyone listening is, right? We do have a problem with people who come here and overstay visas. They are overwhelmingly people who arrive on tourist or student visas, and that is something we need to crack down on, and there are discussions to be had with India, Home Office to Home Office, about taking back people who shouldn't be here. None of that is in this deal. The Indian High Commissioner, who I think you may have had on your programme, very, very intelligent, very Anglophile guy, was saying to me yesterday, he said, I think my English must be bad, because I keep on explaining to people that there's nothing about migration in this deal, and they keep asking me the same questions. You know, I get that people are angry about migration. I am too. So is everybody. But not everything is about immigration. This is about making more economic opportunities available to this country. And it's also, by the way, about anchoring India in the democratic world, and that is also a good thing.
And again, as you say, moving a lot of our imports from China to India, which I think is no bad thing at all. Well, very interesting explanation. Love to hear people's reaction to what Daniel Hannan said today. 0244 499 1000 to that. Let me also ask you about what's going on closer to home, certainly than India, in terms of the local elections last week and the arrival of another Reform MP in Parliament as her approaching. Basically getting into Parliament for the first time yesterday, along with her fellow MPs. Lots of talk about what do the Tories do now. Are you one of those Conservatives who thinks that, you're going to have to move to reform agenda to be able to compete? Or are you thinking that actually Conservatives need to sit tight? Do you think there should be some sort of deal? Or do you think it's all about changing the leader? Kemi Badenoch right now in the House of Commons questioning the Prime Minister. And we're going to get clips of that a little bit later, the highlights. But lots of talk about Kemi Badenoch being the problem, and that she's a think tank boss, not a Tory leader, not someone who can take the fight to Labour. Some are suggesting, according to a More in Common poll, that the man who could actually bring the Tories back to office is one Boris Johnson. What do you make of all of that?
Well, I mean, I'm a massive Boris fan, but I think there does need to be some kind of accommodation between the two right of centre parties. We have an electoral system that cruelly punishes any split on one side of the spectrum. You know those websites where you can type in the vote totals and it shows you who wins what seat? Yeah. For fun, the other day I put in 25% each for Labour, Conservatives and Reform. The two right of centre parties have twice the Labour vote, and Labour ends up forming the next government. That's the logic of our system. So I do think there will need to be some accommodation. Do you know what? If we were all Mr. Spock from Star Trek, we'd have done it by now, because the geography is so easy. Reform is weak where the Tories are strong, and vice versa. The Tories could be standing down in large parts of the north of England and Wales, Reform in some of the southern counties seats where they have no chance of winning. Sadly, egos get in the way, and so I think it's very unlikely that this will happen. And my worry is that we will end up with another Labour-led government, some kind of leftist coalition government, because the right couldn't get its act together.
Do you think that things would be better if under a different Tory leader who'd be willing to do that accommodation? We know, obviously, it was Nigel Farage standing back and the Brexit Party standing down 250 candidates, which helped Boris Johnson win that 80 majority back in December 2019. He wouldn't have had such a big majority without that, or perhaps even a majority. I think probably would have got a majority, but nothing like what he got. Do you think that someone like Boris Johnson would be the answer? You say you're a big fan, but bearing in mind, he's responsible for the Boris wave of migration when he was in office.
Yeah, I think it was I thought at the time it was an odd mistake not to acknowledge Nigel in any way for having made that decision. It was bizarre. I was expecting when Boris formed the next government that there'd be some recognition, some public acknowledgement, and I think that was an error. In terms of who should be leader, that's way above my pay grade. I'm not an MP. I don't get a vote, and I've made it I'm a great believer in parliamentary sovereignty. I've made it a rule ever since 2001, only really to get involved in leadership contests once they come to me as an ordinary party member. But I think the bigger thing is that whoever is Tory leader, both the Conservative Party and the Reform Party have a floor below which they're not going to sink.
Yeah.
And so neither party is going to gobble the other one up, at least not in any kind of meaningful timetable. And therefore we come back to the hard maths of the situation, that either they agree in a limited way to stand down in seats which they cannot win but which the other one can, or we risk having a large, as we have at the moment, a large left of centre parliamentary majority based on a tiny share of the popular vote.
It's going to be a very interesting few years ahead. Lord Hannan, Daniel Hannan, really great to talk to you. Do come on the show again soon. Conservative peer, former advisor to the UK Board of Trade. Thank you for that. Always good to get Lord Hannan on. His columns are weekly columns in newspapers, absolutely superb. He does detail more than an awful lot of other people in this line of work do. Did he persuade you, Claire Pearsall, about the trade deal with India, that actually a lot of people, maybe including us, are sort of conflating different aspects of news about India and the relationship with India and migration with the trade deal?
No.
There we are then.
I mean, Daniel Hannan is exceptionally good at explaining the trade deal, but you cannot take the migration aspect out of it, and that's where I disagree.
Often that goes into trade. It's one of the reasons why we were told that there were difficulties getting this over the line was that India was pushing for more visas.
Yeah. And it's always been the way. And even when I was at the Home Office, any kind of deal that came up, the Indian government said, what about the number of visas we can have for
Why
X,
do
Y,
they
and Z?
want more visas? Again, I've never understood, why do countries want their best, their great... people who are willing to up sticks and go to another country and work and are valued elsewhere. I mean, they're pretty get up and go people. I would have thought you'd want to keep those people in your own country. I'd like to keep those people... I don't want to stop people from leaving. I just want them to think that Britain is a brilliant place to stay and work and to make their future. So why do countries want to do a deal to create visas where they can send their best abroad?
Because they know eventually those people will come back, but the money will also flow back into the country, because the people that come over to the United Kingdom, for example, will have family back in India where they come from. They know that money will flow back into the country, so it's good for their own economy. That's a very simplistic view of it, but that was the most cases that I saw was that was exactly what happened.
OK. And in terms of where we were on the Tories, you're a Tory party member as well. Boris Johnson, whenever I see this, Daily Mail are obsessed with Boris Johnson going back as Prime Minister. I don't know if they think they can keep him as a columnist or not.
Yes.
I was absolutely 100%. I wanted him to go over Partygate. I thought it was appalling. I mean, I genuinely, it wasn't about eating cake. No. It was about putting rules for people which he knew and his staff all knew were not necessary, controlling our lives outrageously, unnecessarily. They knew those rules were unnecessary because they didn't bother having them where they were. They didn't do the masks, they didn't do the social distancing. They were, we're all working together. Well, we were all working together in this office and we still had to obey those rules and those laws. I will never forgive them. I genuinely think what they did was criminal. I am bitter about this and will be forever. And anyone who isn't hasn't been paying enough attention. Because, by the way, have you seen our economy? Have you seen the state of our young people? Have you seen the state of our high streets? Have you seen the state of our treasury? Have you seen it? Well done, NHS. Well done, everybody, because that's what he did to us. And I will never forgive him for that. And people go, oh, well, he was being pushed into it all. Well, no, he was the Prime Minister. He wanted the job. He didn't pay attention. I've got every sympathy for him when he was ill himself, but the rest of the time he wasn't ill, and he could have acted on this, and he could have put some of these... what we're told about his morals and his beliefs and his ethics as a free marketeer and as a liberal, he could have put some of those into action, but he didn't. And the Boris wave of migration afterwards as well. Huge, literally 1 million plus more people coming into this country 2 or 3 years in a row. Thanks, Boris Johnson. Why does anyone seriously think that he's still someone who people will vote for?
Because there are
Finish my rant, sorry.
Don't
mind me having a moment.
Who will look at Boris Johnson and think he is the God above. He is the Messiah in some people's eyes, and that will never change.
Well, it's like his appeal to women. Again, I've met the man. Yes. Literally, women queue up to be his mistress or his lover. I mean, I'm on a grand scale. Can they see him?
It's not my view of what the perfect man is.
I don't get it.
That's it and all about it.
I don't get any of it.
Do you know what? It would be my final straw for membership of the party that I've had for
be a
excess
leaving.
of 25 years. That would be my red line, I'm afraid.
I think people
he is not the one to bring this back.
Well, I think people are just completely forgetting what he did. I mean, I really
they do. People's memories are short when it comes to things like this.
Well, he lied to Parliament, which is all it should always be. I know there's not answering the question here, but he absolutely blatantly lied to Parliament. And I always said to him, you can lie to your wives and your girlfriends and your lovers, that's absolutely fine, but you don't get to lie to me as a voter. It's not going to fly with me at all, certainly not in Parliament. That gets you out of office as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, let's take a quick break. I do want to hear from you. Give us a call. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Boris Johnson, is he the answer? I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Dan Hannan had to say on all the big stories of the day. Also, actually, really intrigued on your thought about reform councillors refusing to take training on net zero. What training do you need on net zero? I mean, I don't know. What is the training? Turn the heating down. I don't know. Don't fly anywhere. And diversity, equity and inclusion. The MPs haven't taken it either in the Commons, and the local council, 677 of them not doing it. All for that. Do give us a call. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Have you been asked to do that at your office, in your workplace, and have you agreed to do it? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
The sort of people that we've had standing for us up and down the country, by and large, are talented, able, driven people who desperately want best for their country. Now, as I say, there will be mistakes made. Some people might find the workload is huge. Though I've never seen that many councillors who are hospitalised through overwork. But I think that there is that drive and that ambition is there, and there is a can-do attitude.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning, welcome. No, good afternoon. Sorry, welcome back to the show. 12:25 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pistol's still with us. We're now joined by Vernon. He's in Staffordshire, and he's given us a call on 0344 499 1000, as you can at any time. Reacting to what our last guest, Lord Hannan, had to say. Vernon, did you agree with Dan Hannan? Did he convince you this India trade deal's a good deal or not?
Not at all. Daniel's a lovely man, but he's talking all the dash.
Let's go with that. I always have this little bit of a moment. Oh God, what word's coming out? What did you disagree with him on?
Well, the reality of it is the optics are fantastic, Julia. The reality is very different. We've had 250,000 Indian citizens in this country in the last 12 months. You are now opening the floodgates to probably 500,000 extra Indian citizens. Now, I wouldn't mind.
Why do you say that? He says, look, this has got nothing to do with migrants. It's got nothing in the deal.
It's to do with workers, Julia. India is the sort of epicenter of call centres, IT centres. I can categorically tell you that the optics are fantastic. The reality is completely different. I have no axe to grind with Indian citizens. I import from India. I know exactly what is going to happen. The IT industry will change. Call centres will change.
Well, they're going to import Indian workers to here. But here's the thing. Why would they do that? Because surely they can pay them less in India and it's cheaper for them to have them in India.
Yeah, they can, but also they would obviously like a presence in a very lucrative market, actually here on the ground. Now, Julia, I don't mind if they're all doctors, professors, brain surgeons, but they're not. The NHS.
Well, the ones coming in on the boats over the channel, they're taking up all those jobs.
I don't think so, Julia. It's a very large country See, Daniel is an incredibly intelligent and a great orator. Brilliant, magnificent man. But you and I know that this country doesn't believe a word that Westminster comes up with. And as for Claire, I'm sorry, Tories are toast. I am a Tory. The Tory party is finished. It will never resurface. And unfortunately, we have to accept that. It's very sad for me. 60 years of age.
You've gone over to Reform?
I have, yes, I have.
Hold on a second, but you've got to remember, I mean, people have talked about the Tory party being toast on many an occasion, and yet, I mean, you know, and yet it's the most successful political party in the Western world.
Historic, Julia. Listen, put me in half. I'm blue. My team is claret and blue. My party is blue. It is a terrible, terrible thing to admit, but Tories are finished. It's over. Whatever. If I was an investor into the Tory party, I'd grab my money and I would run, because you're just throwing it down a bottomless pit.
There's not a Tory leader that could...
Zero, not even one, because they lied, Julia. I haven't said that. The current Prime Minister lies for a living, like they all do. They're lying scoundrels, as far as I'm concerned, in Westminster.
Here's the thing. Here's the question. If, let's say, Reform, again, I wrote a piece about this in the Sun last December, people were just laughing at me like how Reform could be the next government, but, you know, as Nigel Farage said, they're not laughing now. If and when Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister, and he's a good friend of mine, I've known him for many years, I've got him out quite a few scrapes over the years, as he knows, if and when, I can guarantee you that after 4 or 5 years in office, voters will be saying exactly the same thing about him. Isn't it just kind of we force our politicians to lie to us because we insist on saying, I want all these great services, but I want my taxes to go down. I want this and I want that. You can't have it all.
Politicians, Nigel Farage will have the difficult conversations, Julia. The gutless liars in Westminster will not have the difficult conversations. They know that millions of people have come to this country over the last decade. Yeah. They've encouraged it. Yeah. They continue to encourage it. Yeah. Labour and Conservatives. I wouldn't trust them with the dinner money of my children. They are the worst people in the world, and they lecture and they posture and they tell lies, Julia. It's Nigel's time to take over the forum. I mean, no offence to any Tories, but it's finished. Okay. It's heartbreaking. It's done.
I think Vernon knows which way he's going, doesn't he? I don't think we can have any... There's no lack of clarity there. Vernon in Staffordshire, thank you very much indeed. Claire Pearsall?
The Tory party is damaged beyond belief.
Telling you, I'm not... Okay. I don't even think... Just look at her face. I don't think she even believes what she's saying herself.
You know, when you listen to something and it's just like, I understand Vernon's anger with the Conservative Party, and trust me, I have my own level of anger with them. I don't see them as completely finished. I think that unless they do better in the next 6 to 9 months, They may well be finished.
I do just think we've got so many commentators who always just say like, we moved up two-tip. Two-party politics is over. Now we're in the era of multi-party politics. Now we're in this. Keir Starmer, could never ever possibly win. The Tories were going to be in power. Boris Johnson for 2 terms. Keir Starmer could possibly win, and then he wins a big league. I just don't think you can ever, as Donald Trump said to Mark Carney yesterday, never say never on anything. I think the world of politics is in so much upheaval.
Yeah, it is.
You don't know what's going to happen. War, pestilence, goodness knows what. You cannot predict anything anymore. And I think the main thing is we don't want, as for me, I don't want any party to be able to predict any voters. I want everyone's vote to be up for grabs for actual policies.
And people need to vote. And I think this is what you see. You look at the turnout.
Runcorn, 6, majority of 6. Don't ever say that your vote doesn't count. Absolutely. 12:32 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about, a woman who knows about the crucial aspect of getting that vote out, Nicola Sturgeon, no longer First Minister of Scotland, but she's finally broken her silence on that Supreme Court ruling on one of the issues that, helped bring her down, and that's the balance between trans rights and women's rights. We're going to be talking to the director of For Women Scotland, Susan Smith, one of the women who won that fantastic Supreme Court ruling all those weeks ago, about how Nicola Sturgeon has responded, and also why so many NHS hospitals don't think they have to obey the law. That's coming up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, also Claire Palesil with me. Let's talk right now about Nicola Sturgeon, because she has finally, the First Minister of Scotland as was, broken her silence over the Supreme Court gender ruling. Well, who better to talk to about this than one of the women who helped win that fantastic ruling? That's Susan Smith, Director of For Women Scotland. A very big welcome back to the show, Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. So, Nicola Sturgeon, I mean, there's no doubt at all that actually a big part of her downfall was her stance on the issue of, again, people talk about trans people. No, it was always actually about women's rights and being trampled on. And she was part of an SNP government that instituted some really quite, I mean, I would say borderline insane rules in terms of gender self-ID. And yes, by all means, let's a man who's, who's raped 2 women, has been convicted of it, go into a women's prison because he's put on a wig and on his pink leggings you can see his meat and 2 veg on display, but he says he's a woman, so he must be. I mean, a level of madness that I think most British people, frankly, not willing to put up with. But she has finally spoken and given a reaction to the Supreme Court gender ruling, quite some weeks on, but refused to apologise to women wronged by her ideology. And she has insisted, I think quite extraordinarily, that she had always campaigned for the protection and the enhancement of women's rights and had always recognise different views. Do recollections differ for Women Scotland?
Yeah, this is historical revisionism at its finest, isn't it? She didn't want to listen to us. I mean, she's even blocked us on Twitter. This
course
is
she has.
how.
Well, it's all that abuse you send us, Susan. You know.
It definitely is. All those things like we can't have penises. She has created this narrative, and I don't know why she thinks anyone's going to buy it, because she never spoke up for women's rights. And, you know, politicians have different priorities. Hers was presumably independence, although I know some people question that as well. But she didn't have to be at the forefront of women's rights. But she shouldn't pretend now that she was, when she sought actively to destroy them.
Yeah.
And she wasn't interested in our views. We didn't get in the door with ministers. She just spoke to the paid lobby groups who all agreed with her. She surrounded herself with this circle, the National Advisory Council, who she had selected, and they told her what to do, and they all patted each other on the back and said, "Isn't this marvellous? We're seeking diverse views," but they weren't interested in what ordinary women thought, and they certainly weren't interested in what the kind of women who were locked up in prison with these awful murderers or women in needing rape crisis services. She didn't have any care for what they thought.
It really was extraordinary, especially as she was happy to play along with the whole first woman First Minister of Scotland and go on about that and play that card to women in privilege and power doing rather better than the women you were talking about there. But this, I mean, it was part of her downfall. Of course, there was also the criminal investigation into her husband and other leading figures in the SNP as well. Of course, the history she had with the former leader, the late Alex Salmond as well. There's lots going on there. But I think for most people, this was such a key issue over this. And it is extraordinary the reaction of many of the great and the good who have decried women activists simply talking about standing up for women's legal rights, fought for and enshrined in law for a long time to be protected from the encroachment of men who claim to think that they are women. That's as far as we can go with who those people are. And the abuse of women, transphobic, bigoted. I believe Nicola Sturgeon once threw out racist and homophobic at women's rights groups as well. I don't know where that even came from. That came quite bizarre. But she's, of course, not the only leader who's been like this. I mean, Keir Starmer has accepted the ruling, and we're told by Number 10 that he does now accept that it's not 99.9% of women who don't have a penis, it's actually 100%. He hasn't said it himself. He said trans women are women. He said not everyone, some women have a penis. But it's incredible how many of the people, the organisations, the politicians in particular, who have pushed this issue as a sort of religious zealotry view for quite a few years now, 10, 12 years, are not willing to relent that easily.
Yeah, and I don't mind, if politicians step back and say, OK, fair play, I was wrong, I got it wrong, and the Supreme Court said this, and now let's all have a proper conversation and we'll talk to these women who were calling bigots last week. But yeah. I can work with that. What I cannot work with is somebody who is refusing to accept she was wrong, who was actually casting aspersions on the Supreme Court. Yeah. Hers was just the slightly more politely worded version of what Maggie Chapman of the Greens was doing the other week, which was quite appalling. I don't know if you saw that. She was out ranting on the streets saying that the Supreme Court, there was bigotry, hatred and prejudice coming from the Supreme Court. And I think Nicola Sturgeon's response is a slightly more diplomatically worded way of saying that. But
she's still hoping for a job on the international scene. So, she's got to play along with all of the latest woke madness. I'll tell you what's more important, though, than politicians saying I was wrong. And again, I do still have an issue, even if she and Keir Starmer and all the rest of them all said I was completely wrong. I still don't understand why a Supreme Court judge saying men aren't women and women aren't men and women can't become men and men can't become women. I don't know why that would change your view. If you honestly have believed that all this time, I don't know why your view would change. So I don't think they ever really believed it. Remember, they were lying to us all the time and calling us all bigots and transphobes, even though they knew what we were saying was true. Again, they're either stupid, they're either insane, or they were lying. All three should preclude you from public office.
I think they were They didn't believe it. And I think the other thing is that a lot of them were scared of these activists.
Well, you know what? Sod them.
They're
Sod them.
people.
Because
I'm scared of
they
them.
came for you. They attempted to come for me, but that stuff wore off duck's back. I've dealt with worse abuse than those lot. But no, I lost loads of work. I'm quite happy to. If someone doesn't employ me because I don't pretend to believe nonsense, I don't want to work for them anyway. But the abuse that people like you got, abuse that J.K. Rowling gets, you know, Maya Forstater, I mean, Sharon Davies, amazing women campaigning on this issue. Some of the men, Graham Linehan and others, losing work. But the idea that these politicians say, oh, I was scared, doesn't wash. Sorry.
Well, it doesn't, because they should have shown courage and political leadership. I want politicians who can stand up for what's right. That's their job.
Yeah, exactly. But also, if you're willing to lie about something like that that's so blatantly obviously not true, what else are you lying about? And that's the big worry. Let's talk, though, about, you know, women in the real world right now who are still dealing with this, because I remember saying on the day, you know, we'll see whether this actually plays out or not. Supreme Court ruling is very, very clear. If you have a single-sex facility, whether it's a refuge, whether it's a hospital ward, whether it's a lesbian dating group that says, you know, it's single-sex, lesbians by definition single-sex, then you cannot allow men who claim to be women in those safe places. Does seem to me an awful lot of organisations are saying, nah, not playing along, whether it's, you know, theatres, whether it's NHS hospitals extraordinarily, whether it's numerous other bodies who are just simply saying, we are simply not going to change our policy. Particularly, I think it's an issue, and Sex Matters, the women's rights group, has raised this with the dozens of NHS trusts who are blatantly, right now, breaking the law. Not just, it hasn't changed. The law is as it was. It was being wrongly interpreted. That if it's a single-sex ward, or if it's a women's toilet or changing room, whether for staff or for patients, it must be for women only and not men who claim to be women. What's going to happen in those hospitals, though?
Well, I think they're going to have to go back to court, and we've said, you know, if people want to go to court, we're all for it. Kind of bring it.
But you're going to win.
Yes. And they are going to win. And it's going to start to get expensive for organisations. And I think you can see the more sensible organisations like Barclays, who probably don't want employees turning up and suing the pants off them, going, actually, you know what, we will abide by the law. But even before we won this case, these organisations were acting unlawfully because self-ID has never been the law.
Yeah.
And it's organisations like Stonewall who have lied and are continuing to lie.
Yep.
And the Scottish government are still not getting rid of Stonewall. So they are still allowing them in to give guidance.
Taxpayers are paying for them to give advice. It's against the law. But also, I mean, we've seen the police. I mean, the police chiefs organisation basically saying, well, we're going to move slowly on this about whether or not we allow basically men dressed as women, calling themselves Sheila, to strip search a woman prisoner or suspect. I mean, it is just untenable. We need direction from the Prime Minister. He needs to say, this is the law. You need to change your policies by next Sunday, and that's the end of the matter.
And you know what's probably even more likely to happen with the police is that they're going to arrest another Isla Bryson, and he's going to insist a female police officer strip search him. And if they don't change the policies to abide by the law, they're going to be in trouble, because that police officer will have very good grounds to sue them for all sorts of things, including sexual assault. And we'd all be right behind her,
absolutely.
obviously.
By the way, though, all of these, when there is a payout, if it's a public body, all of those fines, all of those court costs, all paid for by us, the taxpayer. And I want everyone involved who fights these and doesn't change. But again, I want them all sacked. There needs to be a penalty for refusing to obey the law, especially when you're in a public institution.
We've said government, especially the Scottish government, funds all these organisations that are lying about the law, and we want them to stop funding them. And we don't think that should be difficult. They're claiming it's so impossible to do, but they wouldn't allow it in any other sector.
Well, you know, that's just you being bigoted again, Susan. What can I say? Susan Smith, you are fabulous. You're Director for Women Scotland. Thank you so much. Oh, great work you've done. I love the confidence. I love you know what? We've won now, and we are going to make sure that law is enforced. Susan Smith, thank you so much. Claire Pearsall smiling through all of that. It's just extraordinary. Police, NHS, loads of public bodies just saying, we're just not going to obey the law. I don't think you get an option.
Well, you don't, and you wouldn't do it in any other sphere. You wouldn't do it with any other law. And if anybody was on my side, I'd want it to be Susan and her gang.
Oh, my God.
I really do. I think they're awesome, and they've done such great work.
Oh, they really have. We salute you.
Yes.
We salute you. And our time has come for me to say goodbye to you. Thank you so much for joining us. A couple of moments, we're going to have Peter Cardwell in the studio talking about the highlights of PMQs. Interestingly, Kemi Badenoch did not mention that trade deal. I wonder if she's backtracked on whether or not she thinks there's an issue with it. Who knows? You certainly aren't on the phones, that's for sure. But right now it's time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning a weekend away in Munich at the end of May. What would you be doing that for? Oh, you'll be watching one of the biggest games in European football, the Champions League final. And we're putting the small matter of £5,000 in your pocket to spend however you want. Have a listen.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation and an uber-massive £5,000 in your hand. How about that? Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win that VIP trip, simply text the word football to 83338 by the 16th of May, 11 p.m. A text will cost you £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission. Or you can just send your name and number by post to Champions League Final Comp, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. It must arrive by 5 p.m. on May the 21st.
Do not miss out on that amazing giveaway from our colleagues at Talk Sport. Very good luck to you. Let's take a quick break. Peter Cardwell up next. This is Talk.
There is no reason for this country to have a trade deal with India. What benefit do we get out of a trade deal with India? Any goods we produce, which they want to buy, they have to buy anyway because they're high-tech goods made in the United Kingdom, incapable of being bought from anywhere else. We're not going to get any greater number of exports to India as a result of a trade deal. This favours, when you have a trade deal of the kind that's so imbalanced between the United Kingdom and India, where we have such high standards, such high regulations.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. 12:50 is the time to like to say Talk presenter and political commentator Peter Cardwell has joined us in the studio. Very, very lovely to see you. And basically, you've been watching PMQ, so we don't have to. A lot of people expecting, certainly including me, Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, would go with this new British-Indian trade deal. She's been very critical of it in terms of two-tier tax of British and Indian workers. Didn't mention it.
Maybe next week, because everyone thought last week she'd talk about
about net zero because that was the big story then. But this week she talked about net zero. So maybe next week she'll talk about the trade deal. It is weird. Well, it is weird. Although before we got to that, she talked a lot about the winter fuel allowance, which a lot of people are thinking Labour might do a U-turn on.
And that's been denied by Labour. They're not going to do it. But there's polling suggesting that actually if they did, they would get a more favourable view from the public.
Yes, indeed. So the first exchange, which I'm not going to show you, was essentially her saying, will you reverse it? He said no, it's all down to the black hole, £22 billion. She says that's nonsense. And then she sort of picked it up in this clip I'm about to show you.
Let's have a watch and listen.
Mr. Speaker, the only black hole is the one the Prime Minister is digging. This issue affects some of the poorest and most vulnerable pensioners. His mayor in Doncaster says it's wrong. His First Minister in Wales says it's wrong. Even his own MPs are saying it's wrong. He's refused to listen to me on this. Will he at least listen to his own party and change course?
Mr. Speaker, let's spell this out. All the parties opposite would take this country back to where it was a few years ago. Broken public finances, interest rates through the roof, NHS waiting lists at all-time high. Because no other party in this House is prepared to say how they would put the finances straight. No other party is saying how they would invest in our NHS and public services. No other party is focused on the long-term prosperity of Britain. No one on this side, Mr. Speaker, is denying how big the challenges that we face, but no one on that side of the House is even prepared to take those challenges on.
Well, that's the exchange. I mean, there's never any love lost between those two, is there? The winter fuel allowance, though, there are lots of Labour MPs saying that it's basically their poll tax that they
Yes, and certainly it's led to a huge amount of consternation, but also, will Labour do a U-turn? They say no. Another thing that Labour have been talking about quite a lot is net zero. Kemi Badenoch talking about that, but actually, interestingly, a little bit later on in their exchanges, Keir Starmer threw back some words, not just of the Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride on net zero, welcoming it, saying it's good, but also Kemi Badenoch in this clip.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it, on the net zero, is that she actually one of the few Tory MPs who did raise some concerns way back when, 2019, things, but been signed up to a government that had it in the manifesto.
Collective responsibility.
And again, and this is where they're up against not just on the immigration issue, but also on the net zero issue and the wokedom against reform, which have just got a very clean track record on all of this. Well, let's have a watch and listen to that exchange on net zero then.
This is what she said. We believe that green trade and investment will be the future-proofing force that will help us create better tomorrow. And then she went on to say this, Mr. Speaker. It's long-term investment in nuclear and renewables that will reduce our dependencies on fossil fuels and keep down consumer costs. Now, she's got a reputation apparently for straight talking. She was right then, wasn't she?
Mr. Speaker, this approach to net zero is irrational. It's doomed to fail. Those aren't my words, they're Tony Blair's. He wants to throw words back, he should speak to him. Bring it back. But the truth is, the Prime Minister is on another planet. His net zero plans mean ever more expensive energy.
Net zero, Mr. Speaker, is an opportunity to be seized. The Leader of the Opposition, I don't think, is yet a climate denier, but she's a climate defeatist. She doesn't believe in Britain's ability to win the race for our economy, businesses and jobs. And they've never backed Britain. There's nothing patriotic about that.
That's very interesting. That's obviously something they've... he didn't come up with that on his own, did he? He wrote that. Net zero is an opportunity to be seized, and Badenoch is a climate defeatist.
Certainly, no. And listen, this I think is becoming quite a big dividing line between the Conservatives and Labour. Obviously,
I'm thrilled by this. I've spent years trying to tell them all to do this. But
of course, Starmer will just throw back the words as he did. But certainly, the wheels are coming off net zero. I think a lot of people are very, very annoyed about this, and actually, energy policy in general, not something you necessarily would have predicted would be a big thing, but has become a major issue.
Underlines everything in our economy.
Well, it's changing the idea of net zero is to change the whole economy, but really interestingly as well, the point has been made by Labour that if there's a big problem, they can fix it in a day. Look at Scunthorpe and the blast furnace. And this was brought up not just by Kemi Badenoch, but also by Stephen Flynn, the leader of the SNP.
Who we used to see a lot more of when the SNP were the third biggest party.
That's right.
Get two questions.
You only get him about once every 3 or 4 weeks now.
He's a great performer. Well, he won't come on the show. I've asked him, won't come on the show.
I've asked him in person as well.
Likewise, Well, let's have a watch and listen to what he had to say.
Harbour Energy, the largest independent player in the North Sea,
have announced that they are about to shed their workforce by 25%. That's 250 jobs in my constituency gone in the blink of his eye. And do you know who they blame, Mr. Speaker? They blame the policies of the Labour Party. So can I ask the Prime Minister, in fact, can I invite the Prime Minister to come to Aberdeen and explain to my constituents why he is willing to move heaven and earth to save jobs in Scunthorpe while destroying jobs in Scotland?
Mr. Speaker, nobody wants to see job losses, but I'd remind the right honourable member that before we came into office 10 months ago, the SNP government in Holyrood, alongside the Conservative government, did absolutely nothing for projects like Groundnut. Absolutely nothing.
I mean, it's a fair point from Stephen Flynn, is it not? In terms of the mood of the parties, this was the first, Peter Cardwell, the first PMQs since we've had those local elections. And the thing is, normally you'd have the Labour Party riding high or the Tory Party riding high, and if you're going against it. Both parties were utterly trounced by reform. Nigel Farage not getting a question. He got one last week, but he'd much prefer to have one this week.
Yes.
And so, of course, he was there, the swearing in of Sarah Pouchin.
Yeah.
Well, you know how to pronounce... Tell us why you know how to pronounce Sarah Pouchin's name.
I was on air on Saturday, and Sarah Pouchin rang in the number 03444991000 and said, it's not Pouchin, it's Pouchin, at which point my producer, quick as a flash, said, would you like to come on and do an interview? To which she said, I'm a bit busy, but some other time. You're bringing in.
Good to know you're listening.
She apparently heard it on her car radio because she was out and about.
On Mike's show today, and I have to say it was really impressive. Just she seems like a very sensible figure.
And I think Labour Party MPs in particular are spooked. You're right. I think both Conservative and Labour wanted it all to go away. A little bit later in PMQs, there were some Labour MPs talking about a few reform issues, saying, I'm doing this for my constituency. They're definitely spooked.
But Labour kind of been laughing at it. So we've got this big majority, and it's the Tories who are hurt by reform. It's that party that's that split on that side. The reform are clearly taking from both sides, and they are now all speaking. Well, I wonder if they're going to do what they tried in Germany to do to the AfD, what they've done in France to do to the National Rally. Different parties, different policies, different leaders, obviously, but I wouldn't put it past anyone. I've never been a conspiracy theorist, but this existential threat to both parties, I think they're going to get worried.
Politics is changing in this country. There was a massive upset on Thursday, and today at PMQs, both the leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister basically didn't mention it.
Yeah, just pretend it didn't
Just pretend it didn't happen.
Like the grooming gangs. Oh, no, dog whistle politics. Sorry, guys. Anyway, we'll just pretend this whole show didn't happen because Ian Collins here to take
I mean, the naivety of you two is breathtaking, frankly, and I'll tell you why. That is because the answer, as I'm sure you've touched on, is Boris Johnson. He's coming back. He's going to reinvigorate the Tory party.
That poll,
all of those people.
What these polls?
I'm not sure I have the strength.
Poll schmolls. I mean, I get it. It's curious, isn't it? But at what point?
Well, this is a more in common poll. They're basically saying that the only Tory leader who could actually defeat reform in the polls apparently is Boris Johnson. Yeah, I mean,
really?